What if everything you learned about history was incomplete? A carefully edited version of events with the most incredible chapters removed. Picture entire libraries of knowledge deliberately hidden. Civilizations with technologies we can barely comprehend. And prophecies about our own time that were deemed too dangerous for public consumption. For centuries, power structures across the globe have made concerted efforts to suppress specific discoveries and manuscripts, not because they were false, but because the truths they contained were simply too revolutionary for the established order. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on 28 of these forbidden passages, texts so controversial they were meant to stay lost forever, erased from our collective memory. This isn't just about dusty old scrolls. It's about ideas that challenge the very foundation of our world, from how we generate energy to our understanding of human potential itself. The journey we are about to embark on together will take us from sealed Tibetan vaults to hidden chambers beneath the world's most iconic ancient structures. We will examine accounts of sunken continents wielding crystal power, explore records of genetic engineering that predate modern science by millennia, and decipher warnings from the past about cycles of civilization that directly speak to our current global situation. Each of these 28 forbidden passages represents a piece of a puzzle, a fragment of a hidden history that, when assembled, reveals a narrative far more astounding than the one we've been taught. The common thread connecting them all is a consistent pattern of suppression by those who feared that such knowledge would render their authority obsolete, unravel economic systems built on scarcity, and empower individuals beyond institutional control. This is more than an exploration. It is an intellectual and emotional adventure that will challenge your perception of reality. As we move from one revelation to the next, you will begin to see a pattern emerge, a pattern of human potential curtailed and abundance withheld. The very existence of these suppressed texts suggests that our ancestors, or perhaps even other intelligences they encountered, possessed understandings about consciousness, technology, and the cosmos that we are only now, in the 21st century, beginning to rediscover through quantum physics and advanced theoretical research. The recovery of this knowledge now is no coincidence. It arrives at a critical juncture for humanity as we face ecological and social crises that these ancient wisdom traditions may hold the keys to solving. So prepare to have everything you thought you knew about our past turned upside down as we begin with our first enigmatic discovery, the legendary Lemurian Crystal Chronicles. Our journey into the forbidden begins with a legend that has captivated mystics and researchers for generations, the story of a vast, sunken continent in the Pacific Ocean known as Lemuria. Imagine a civilization not built on steam or electricity, but on the resonant power of massive, naturally formed crystals. According to the forbidden text known as the Lemurian Crystal Chronicles, discovered in a long-sealed Tibetan vault, this was precisely their reality. The chronicles describe immense, geometrically perfect crystals, some taller than modern skyscrapers, which were not merely decorative but formed the core of their entire society. These structures were said to generate limitless clean energy, powering cities, enabling instantaneous communication across vast distances, and even influencing weather patterns. The text paints a picture of a society in perfect harmony with the Earth's own energies, using these crystalline amplifiers to tap into the planet's very life force. What makes this chronicle so compelling and so threatening to established knowledge are the specific technical details it contains. The manuscript doesn't just speak in mystical terms, it provides intricate descriptions of a science based on harmonic resonance. It explains how specific sound frequencies, when channeled through these giant quartz formations, could cause the crystals to vibrate in ways that manipulated gravitational fields and rearranged molecular structures. This is a concept that modern quantum physics is only just beginning to explore, with scientists today experimenting with acoustic levitation and resonance-based technologies. A geologist who allegedly studied fragments of the text, a man named Dr. Aris Thorne, reportedly claimed that the mineralogical descriptions referenced types of quartz with piezoelectric properties far beyond what we currently understand, suggesting the Lemurians possessed a knowledge of material science we have yet to rediscover. Of course, not everyone is convinced. Skeptics rightly point out that the flowery, almost poetic language of the Chronicle reads more like a spiritual allegory than a technical manual. They argue it could be a metaphorical warning about the dangers of hubris, using the image of a crystal-powered society as a symbol for a culture that reached too high and fell. This tension between literal and symbolic interpretation is at the very heart of why such texts become forbidden. If it is merely a myth, why was it so carefully hidden away? The answer may lie in the Chronicles' devastating final chapters, which describe the cataclysm that doomed Lemuria. The text suggests their advanced technology became a victim of its own success. A cascading resonance frequency, perhaps triggered by geological shifts or solar activity, spiraled out of control, causing the very continental plate their society was built upon to fracture and sink beneath the waves. This tragic ending points to the real reason such knowledge may have been suppressed. Imagine if this text fell into the hands of a modern energy corporation or a government. The Chronicles hint at the possibility of energy sources that are completely free, clean, and decentralized concepts that would utterly dismantle our current global economic systems built on the extraction and sale of fossil fuels and other limited resources. The political and industrial powers of any era would have a vested interest in ensuring such a revolutionary technology remained a mere legend, buried in a vault to protect the status quo. The Lemurian Crystal Chronicles therefore stand as a powerful testament to a recurring theme we will see again and again. Knowledge that promises abundance and empowerment is often the very knowledge that is deemed too dangerous to exist. The haunting question it leaves us with is not just about a lost world, but about what other world-changing truths lie buried, waiting to be uncovered. Moving from the tangible crystals of Lemuria, we encounter a forbidden concept even more profound: a library with no physical form, an eternal archive known as the Akashic records. Imagine a dimension where every human thought, every spoken word, every action and its intention throughout all of history is permanently imprinted, not on parchment or stone, but on the very fabric of reality itself. This is the essence of the second forbidden passage, a text that boldly reframes the story of Atlantis not as a simple allegory of pride, but as a stark, historical cautionary tale about the consequences of wielding immense psychic power without the wisdom to control it. The account describes a society that had mastered the use of massive crystal towers, similar to Lemuria's, but employed them as amplifiers for consciousness itself. These crystals, when activated by trained adepts, could project thoughts across continents, heal physical bodies at a distance, and even manipulate the probability of events. The civilization reached heights of collective achievement we can scarcely dream of, but according to the text, this became their undoing. The forbidden manuscript details how factions within Atlantean society began to weaponize this psychic potential. It wasn't a flood or an earthquake that initially doomed them, but a subtler, more insidious catastrophe, a war fought not with bullets but with directed consciousness. One faction sought to use the crystal networks to elevate the entire population into a state of shared awareness and empathy, while another, more powerful group attempted to use the same technology to dominate and control the minds of the masses. The records describe the terrifying results of this psychic conflict. Reality itself began to fray at the edges, with time becoming unstable and the mental boundaries between individuals dissolving into a chaotic soup of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The very amplifiers that were meant to enlighten became conduits for a collective psychosis, leading to social collapse and making the civilization vulnerable to the final, physical cataclysm that sank their continent. This concept of a universal record of all experience is not isolated to this single text. In the late 19th century, the influential philosopher and mystic Helena Blavatsky wrote extensively about the Akasha, describing it as a cosmic mind or a universal library that spiritually advanced individuals could access. Her theosophical writings, while controversial, brought this esoteric idea into Western esoteric thought, suggesting that ancient seers and prophets throughout history were not necessarily receiving divine revelation, but were instead tuning their consciousness to read from this eternal, energetic database. The Forbidden Atlantean passage takes this concept a step further, providing what it claims are specific, practical methodologies for such access. It outlines precise meditative postures, breathing rhythms, and mental focus exercises designed to quiet the individual mind and allow it to resonate with the frequencies of this vast informational field. Why would such seemingly beneficial knowledge be suppressed? The answer lies in its radical potential for democratizing enlightenment. The text suggests that accessing the Akashic records does not require a priestly class, specific genetic lineage, or institutional approval. It presents spiritual insight as an innate human capacity that can be developed with disciplined practice. Throughout history, many religious and political hierarchies have maintained their power by acting as the sole intermediaries between the populace and divine or profound knowledge. A text that provides a direct, unmediated path to universal truth and historical insight would represent an existential threat to such control structures. If every individual could verify spiritual truths for themselves or understand the complete, unedited lessons of history, it would dismantle the need for centralized authority and could inspire movements that challenge the very foundations of society. The manuscript's stark warning that Atlantis fell because its technology outpaced its spiritual and ethical maturity is a message that resonates with terrifying relevance in our own age of artificial intelligence and genetic engineering. This theme of hidden knowledge about the cosmos, locked away to control humanity's self-perception, leads us directly to our next discovery, found not in a mystic library, but in the cold, stone chambers beneath the Great Pyramid. Our third forbidden passage transports us from the psychic realms of Atlantis to the silent, stone observatories of our ancient past, and to a set of scrolls said to have been discovered in a hidden chamber deep beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza. This text, known as the Vault of Celestial Alignments, presents a vision of prehistory that is both breathtaking and deeply unsettling. It claims that the architects of the world's most mysterious sites, from the sprawling complex of Stonehenge on the Salisbury Plain to the towering pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico, were not primitive sun worshippers, but master astronomers possessing a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos that in some ways rivals our own. The scrolls don't just suggest these structures were aligned with the stars. They provide intricate mathematical formulas and geometric proofs demonstrating that these monuments were deliberately positioned to form a vast, interconnected network, a kind of planetary stone computer designed to track immense cycles of time and predict celestial events with pinpoint accuracy. Consider the Great Pyramid itself. Mainstream archaeology acknowledges its sides are aligned with the four cardinal directions with an error of less than 1/15 of a degree, a feat of engineering that would be challenging even with modern technology. The forbidden text, however, goes much further. It describes how the pyramid's narrow ascending passageways were precisely angled to frame specific stars at key dates, acting as a permanent clock in stone that marked the precession of the equinoxes, a 26,000-year cycle that modern astronomy only confirmed centuries later. The manuscript extends this logic globally, drawing connections that conventional science often dismisses as fanciful. It illustrates how the three main pyramids at Giza mirror the belt of the constellation Orion as it appeared around 10,500 BCE, and how this same celestial pattern is echoed in the layout of temples in Cambodia and the mounds of the Mississippi Valley. According to the scrolls, this was not a coincidence of culture, but the signature of a unified global blueprint. The most revolutionary claim within the vault of celestial alignments is that this global network was more than just an observatory. It was a functional calculator designed to harness and measure terrestrial and cosmic energies. The text uses complex terms that resonate with modern physics, describing ley lines, hypothetical alignments of ancient sites as conductive pathways for a subtle planetary energy. It suggests that temples built at the nodes of this network, at specific astronomical alignments, could amplify this energy for purposes that remain partially obscure, but seem connected to agriculture, healing, and perhaps even consciousness itself. This idea of the Earth as a living, energetic organism with a built-in anatomical structure of power points is a concept found in many indigenous traditions, but the Forbidden Scrolls present it as a precise, applied science, complete with engineering specifications. This implies the builders possessed a holistic understanding that completely bypasses our modern compartmentalization of astronomy, geology, and spirituality into separate fields of study. So why was this knowledge locked away? The historical context points directly to the power struggles of the Renaissance. As the text allegedly began to circulate among European scholars, it presented a direct challenge to the geocentric worldview enforced by the Catholic Church. If ancient cultures, long before the birth of Christ, possessed a sophisticated understanding of a heliocentric solar system and could measure cosmic cycles spanning millennia, it undermined the Church's authority as the sole source of truth about the nature of the universe. The timeline of human history and the story of a recently created Earth central to doctrinal teaching would collapse. The Vatican, according to persistent whispers among historians of the esoteric, actively suppressed these scrolls and persecuted the scholars who studied them, ensuring this dangerous knowledge of an ancient, scientifically advanced global culture did not shatter the theological foundations of their power. The implications are staggering, forcing us to confront the possibility that a vast repository of astronomical and earth science was systematically erased, leaving us to rediscover fragments of it centuries later. This profound gap in our historical record, this lost chapter on humanity's relationship with the cosmos, inevitably makes us wonder what other foundational truths about our own existence have been kept from us. A question that leads us directly to our next and perhaps most personally challenging forbidden passage. Now we turn to a forbidden passage that strikes at the very core of our identity, a manuscript that dares to ask the most fundamental question of all: where do we truly come from? The fourth forbidden passage is known as the Codex of Genetic Origins, a text so controversial it is said to be guarded by a reclusive secret society deep within the Himalayan mountains. This is not a creation myth in the traditional sense, but rather what appears to be a technical manual describing a series of deliberate genetic interventions. The Codex presents a startling narrative, claiming that Homo sapiens did not evolve solely through the slow, random process of natural selection, but was instead the product of intentional engineering by a highly advanced non-human intelligence. It describes how these designers or fashioners took existing hominid species and systematically spliced in new genetic sequences, accelerating our cognitive and spiritual development in a single, dramatic leap. This idea, while seemingly ripped from science fiction, finds a curious echo in the halls of modern science. Francis Crick, the Nobel Prize-winning co-discoverer of the structure of DNA, famously proposed the theory of directed panspermia, which suggests that the seeds of life on Earth may have been deliberately spread by an ancient extraterrestrial civilization. While Crick was looking at the very origin of life, the Codex of Genetic Origins zooms in on a much later chapter, focusing specifically on the emergence of modern humans. The text provides what it claims are explicit details about the methods used, describing laboratory-like environments and tools that manipulated the thread of life using a combination of precise sound frequencies and crystalline energy fields. It suggests that our unique capacities for self-awareness, complex language, and abstract thought are the direct results of this genetic upgrade, setting us apart from all other species on the planet. Perhaps the most electrifying claim within the Codex is that this genetic engineering was not a one-time event that left us as a finished product. The manuscript insists that our DNA is not a static blueprint, but a dynamic, mostly dormant library. It describes latent genetic codes, sometimes referred to as junk DNA by contemporary genetics, that contain the blueprints for abilities we consider supernatural. The text lists potentialities like telepathic communication, intuitive healing, and radically extended lifespans, suggesting these are not magical gifts but innate biological functions that could be activated under the right conditions. These conditions are described as a specific combination of spiritual practices, environmental factors, and conscious intention, implying that our own evolution is not yet complete and that we hold the key to unlocking our own next stage of development within our very selves. Understanding why such a revolutionary text would be systematically suppressed requires looking at the profound implications for power structures. If this knowledge became widely accepted, it would fundamentally shatter the prevailing biological paradigm that defines human nature. Governments and institutions that base their authority on a specific, limited view of human potential would find their foundations crumbling. The very notion that we are engineered beings, potentially with creators still observing us, would upend every major religious doctrine and philosophical framework. Furthermore, if humanity believed it could activate dormant DNA to achieve enhanced abilities and longevity, it could lead to a mass shift in priorities away from consumerism and obedience toward personal and collective empowerment. The economic systems that rely on a docile, aging population would be threatened by the prospect of individuals realizing they possess untapped potential for autonomy and extended vitality. The ethical questions this raises are immense, forcing us to confront our own responsibility for a genetic legacy we are only beginning to comprehend. As we move from the mysteries of our genetic code, we encounter a forbidden text that confronts one of humanity's oldest and most profound fears, the finality of death. The fifth forbidden passage, known as the Enigma of Eternal Consciousness, takes us high into the remote, wind-swept caves of the Himalayas, where a manuscript was discovered sealed inside a chamber alongside mummified monks seated in the lotus position. This is not a philosophical treatise on the afterlife. It reads instead as a startlingly practical guidebook, a technical manual detailing specific methods to detach individual awareness from the physical body and preserve it indefinitely. The text describes a multi-stage process combining intense, decades-long meditative disciplines with the ingestion of rare herbal compounds found only in the highest mountain valleys. These preparations, according to the manuscript, gradually loosen the bonds between consciousness and the biological vessel, training the adept to function as pure awareness, independent of the brain's physical machinery. The practices outlined are extraordinarily demanding, requiring a level of mental focus and physical endurance that few could ever achieve. One technique involves visualizing the consciousness as a sphere of light that can be systematically moved through different energy centers in the body before being projected outward. Another describes a specific breathing pattern, synchronized with circadian and seasonal rhythms, said to slow the body's metabolic processes to a near standstill, mimicking the state of death while maintaining a razor-sharp internal witness. The chemical elixirs mentioned are complex concoctions of minerals and psychotropic plants, which the text claims temporarily dissolve the ego's boundaries and allow the practitioner to experience consciousness as a field phenomenon, not something locked inside the skull. This radical reorientation from being a body that has a consciousness to being a consciousness that temporarily inhabits a body is described as the fundamental shift required for the ultimate transition. What makes this ancient manuscript so unsettlingly relevant is how its descriptions resonate with modern neurological research. Scientists studying near-death experiences have documented countless cases where individuals clinically pronounced dead report vivid, lucid awareness outside their bodies, often observing medical procedures with accurate detail before being resuscitated. While mainstream science scrambles to explain these phenomena as hallucinations stemming from a dying brain, the Tibetan text asserts that these are not anomalies, but glimpses of a natural human capacity that can be consciously developed and mastered. It suggests that the near-death state is merely an involuntary and often traumatic glimpse of a journey that trained initiates can navigate with full control and intention, choosing to transfer their awareness to another vessel or simply exist as a non-localized energy pattern. This is precisely why such powerful knowledge was historically restricted. The traditional government of the Dalai Lama, along with other monastic hierarchies, strictly controlled access to these texts, permitting study only to the most advanced and ethically grounded initiates. Their primary concern was not the secrecy of the techniques themselves, but the profound danger of their misuse. In the wrong hands, this knowledge could lead to catastrophic outcomes. An individual attempting these practices without the necessary decades of moral and mental preparation could experience a complete psychological fragmentation, a dissolution of the personal self into psychosis, or what the text grimly refers to as becoming an earth-bound hungry ghost, a consciousness trapped between dimensions, unable to fully let go of the physical world or move on to another state. Furthermore, if such techniques became widespread, the very cultural and social structures that provide meaning and stability could be disrupted by a population no longer fearing death or respecting traditional spiritual authority, potentially leading to societal chaos or a devaluation of human life. The manuscript concludes with a sobering warning that echoes across the centuries. It cautions that premature exploration of the dimensions of consciousness is as reckless as giving a child the keys to a starship. The fabric of personal identity, it explains, is a necessary and delicate construct that provides stability for navigating physical reality. To unravel it without the wisdom to reassemble it on a higher level is to risk losing the self entirely. This cautionary note about the delicate nature of reality and the risks of trespassing into realms we are not prepared for creates a perfect bridge to our next discovery, which pushes even further against the boundaries of our known world, venturing into the uncharted territory of dimensional gateways and parallel existences. The concept of stepping into an entirely different reality, a world just beyond the veil of our own, moves from science fiction into the realm of historical mystery with our sixth forbidden passage. Tucked away in the most restricted section of the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul, researchers allegedly uncovered a magnificent Arabic grimoire, a book of mystical knowledge so potent its very existence was denied for centuries. This text, known as the Gateway to Parallel Realms, does not speak in vague metaphors. It presents a startlingly concrete thesis that our universe is but one layer in a vast, multi-dimensional reality, and that at specific, powerful locations across the globe, the boundaries between these layers grow thin and permeable. The manuscript goes so far as to provide precise mathematical coordinates for these natural portals, often linking them to places of immense geological energy like volcanic mountain ranges, deep oceanic trenches, and ancient crystalline bedrock formations. What makes this grimoire so revolutionary is its blend of the esoteric and the almost scientific. While modern theoretical physics, through concepts like string theory and the many worlds interpretation, seriously entertains the possibility of a multiverse, these remain largely mathematical abstractions. This ancient text, however, offers what it claims are practical, repeatable techniques. It describes complex rituals employed by Persian mystics and Sufi adepts, methods that combine deep trance states, specific harmonic chants, and the use of resonant minerals like lodestone and clear quartz to stabilize these fleeting gateways. The goal was not mere fantasy, but actual traversal, a conscious journey into adjacent realities that might hold alternate histories, different physical laws, or even versions of ourselves. The text carefully distinguishes between mere hallucination and what it calls true crossing, providing methods for verifying one's presence in another dimension by observing consistent environmental details and maintaining a continuous thread of self-awareness. The potential societal impact of such knowledge was not lost on the Ottoman rulers who guarded this grimoire. The empire's stability was built on a rigid social hierarchy and the control of territory and population. The terrifying implication of the Gateway text was that it offered a form of ultimate escape. If a discontented peasant, a persecuted minority, or a rebellious faction could simply walk into another reality, the entire structure of societal control would become meaningless. Why pay taxes, fight in a sultan's war, or endure oppression if a better world might be just a ritual away? The Ottoman authorities suppressed this knowledge not necessarily because they doubted its validity, but because they feared the absolute collapse of the social order it would inevitably cause. The very idea of reality as a fixed, inescapable prison is a cornerstone of most power structures. This manuscript presented a master key, and that was a threat that could not be allowed to circulate. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of the grimoire, however, is its extensive section of warnings. The text explicitly cautions that the veil between worlds is a two-way street. While a skilled mystic might journey out, other things could potentially journey in. It describes various non-physical entities and intelligences that inhabit the adjacent dimensions, some indifferent, some curious, and some possessing a predatory hunger for the unique energetic qualities of our own reality. The rituals include protective measures, circles of salt and silver, specific prayers of exclusion, designed not just to facilitate travel, but to shield the traveler and our world from unintended consequences. This introduces a profound complexity to the nature of reality, suggesting that our comfortable, material world view is not only incomplete but potentially porous, existing in a cosmic neighborhood with inhabitants we are utterly unaware of. This realization that our universe might be just one apartment in a vast and sometimes dangerous cosmic apartment building fundamentally shakes our understanding of where we are and who we might share it with. The idea of viewing history not through dusty books but with the clarity of a live broadcast brings us to our seventh forbidden passage, a concept so revolutionary it seems to defy the very laws of physics as we understand them. Concealed deep within the legendary secret archives of the Vatican, A collection of documents known as the Chronovisor Manuscripts describes a device capable of doing just that, a machine that could peer backward through time. The most astonishing claim within these papers is that the foundational designs for this apparatus were not the product of a 20th century laboratory, but came from the unparalleled mind of Leonardo da Vinci. The manuscripts include what appear to be his engineering sketches for a time mirror, a large concave disc of perfectly polished obsidian mounted within a complex bronze framework inscribed with celestial coordinates. The design specifies that this device must be aligned with specific planetary conjunctions, suggesting it doesn't just passively receive light, but somehow tunes into the residual energy of past events, making them visible on the obsidian's surface like images on a screen. This notion of observing the past directly receives a fascinating, albeit theoretical, nod from the frontiers of modern science. In the world of quantum mechanics, experiments in retrocausality have produced baffling results, demonstrating that particles like photons can be influenced by decisions made in their future. While this is a far cry from watching Caesar cross the Rubicon, it does challenge our classical, linear understanding of cause and effect, hinting that the arrow of time may not be as absolute as we once believed. The Chronovisor manuscripts propose a similar principle on a macroscopic scale, arguing that every event leaves an eternal imprint on the fabric of spacetime, a permanent record that could, in theory, be replayed with the right technology. This provides a sliver of scientific plausibility to Da Vinci's visionary concept, suggesting he may have intuitively grasped a quantum principle centuries before it was formally discovered. The alleged content witnessed through this device forms the core of why it was deemed so dangerous that it had to be suppressed. The manuscripts claim that Vatican scientists and theologians, using a prototype based on Da Vinci's designs, successfully viewed key biblical events. However, what they saw allegedly contradicted centuries of established church doctrine and artistic tradition. The crucifixion, the Sermon on the Mount, even the very nature of pivotal miracles, the Chronovisor's unblinking eye reportedly presented accounts that differed from the canonical Gospels. For an institution built upon being the ultimate custodian of divine truth, such visual evidence presenting an alternative history would represent an existential threat. It would not only shatter the faith of millions, but also completely undermine the Vatican's spiritual and political authority, potentially triggering a theological crisis far greater than the Protestant Reformation. Beyond the immediate religious implications, the existence of a working chronovisor would unleash a tsunami of change across every facet of human society. For historians and archaeologists, it would be the ultimate tool, resolving countless mysteries in an instant. We could finally witness the construction of the pyramids, hear the actual speeches of Abraham Lincoln, or understand the true fate of the Roanoke colony. In law enforcement, it would render every crime solvable, creating an era of perfect justice where no wrong could be hidden. Yet this incredible power carries a terrifying shadow. The ability to observe the past so easily could quickly become the ability to manipulate it. What if one could use the device to discover embarrassing or damaging information about political rivals, living or dead? What if a regime used it to rewrite history to suit its own narrative, creating an unchallengeable, verified past that justifies any present action? The potential for blackmail, historical revisionism, and total social control is almost limitless, turning a tool for enlightenment into the ultimate instrument of oppression. The delicate nature of our shared timeline and the profound responsibility that comes with potentially altering it makes the suppression of such a technology understandable, even as it leaves us to wonder what truths about our own past remain deliberately unseen. The notion of a device that could reveal the past is staggering, But what if ancient sources claim to hold a complete and unedited roadmap to the future itself? This brings us to our eighth forbidden passage, the legendary Sibylline books in their complete, uncensored form. We are not talking about the fragmented, heavily edited versions that Roman historians mention, but the full prophetic collection, said to have been discovered sealed within a forgotten Etruscan tomb, far from the manipulating hands of imperial censors. These texts are described not as vague, poetic omens, but as startlingly precise chronicles of events stretching all the way to our present century. Imagine scrolls that didn't just hint at rising and falling empires, but named specific inventions, detailed geopolitical alliances, and even pinpointed social movements that would define the modern world. The complete Sibylline books, according to those who have allegedly studied them, present history not as a random sequence, but as a predictable pattern of cycles, with our current era of environmental crisis and global interconnection representing a critical turning point that the ancients anticipated with unnerving accuracy. We know from conventional history that the Romans treated their official, abbreviated version of the Sibylline books with immense reverence and fear. They were kept in a stone vault beneath the Temple of Jupiter on Capitoline Hill, and could only be consulted by a special college of priests, and even then, only by direct order of the Senate during moments of extreme crisis, such as plague, military defeat, or strange natural phenomena. The official story is that the original collection, purchased from a mysterious prophetess in the early days of Rome, was accidentally destroyed in a fire. However, the forbidden narrative suggests a much more deliberate act of censorship. The ruling elite quickly realized that the power to interpret prophecy was in many ways greater than the power of the legions. By controlling the oracles, they could justify wars, suppress dissent, and maintain social order by claiming divine mandate for their actions. The complete texts, with their clear and unambiguous predictions, would have stripped them of this interpretive control. If every citizen could read for themselves the inevitable fall of the Republic or the rise of the Empire, it could have inspired revolutions or fatalistic apathy that would have shattered the state's authority long before those events came to pass. The most compelling aspect of these forbidden prophecies is their reported description of civilizational cycles. The texts allegedly describe a recurring pattern where societies reach a peak of technological achievement and global connectivity, only to be undone by the very forces that propelled them forward: environmental neglect, internal social division, and an over-reliance on complex systems that become vulnerable to collapse. The warnings for our own time are said to be particularly stark, highlighting the fragility of our globalized networks and the consequences of disrupting the planet's natural balance. This is not the doomsaying of a lone mystic, but a documented pattern supposedly observed across multiple lost epochs of human history. The message is that our current challenges are not unique. We are living through a phase that has occurred before, and the choices we make now determine whether we navigate this turning point toward renewal or toward a dark age. So why would such a crucial guidebook be hidden away? The reasons are as relevant today as they were in ancient Rome. Widespread knowledge of an accurately predicted future could be socially paralyzing. If people believed a major war or ecological disaster was inevitable, it could lead to mass fatalism, a collective giving up that would ensure the negative prophecy fulfills itself. Conversely, knowledge of a positive future could lead to complacency, an assumption that things will work out well regardless of human effort. Beyond the psychological impact, there is the even more dangerous potential for manipulation. In the wrong hands, a precise prophetic text could become the ultimate tool for geopolitical strategy. A nation that knew the outcome of future conflicts or technological races could position itself to win without a fight, dominating the world by simply following a pre-written script. The suppression of the complete Sibylline books, therefore, can be seen as a desperate attempt to protect the fundamental uncertainty that makes human freedom and moral responsibility possible. It preserves the idea that the future is a landscape of potentialities, not a fixed track, and that our actions, our courage, and our ingenuity still matter in shaping the world to come. This profound conflict between knowing one's destiny and having the freedom to shape it creates a perfect bridge to our next discovery, which deals not with the fate of empires, but with the transformation of the most coveted substance on Earth. The dream of creating gold from common metals is perhaps the most famous and enduring symbol of the alchemist's quest, often dismissed by modern science as a primitive fantasy born of greed and superstition. But what if the true goal of alchemy was not mere wealth? And what if the legendary philosopher's stone was not a mythical object, but a precise, repeatable process whose instructions were almost lost to history? Our ninth forbidden passage, known as the Hermetic Formula for Transmutation, forces us to confront this very possibility. Imagine a single, miraculously preserved scroll, smuggled out of the great library of Alexandria just before its final destruction, containing not cryptic symbols and allegorical drawings, but explicit, step-by-step instructions for the transmutation of base lead into pure, shimmering gold. This is not a text of magic, but of a forgotten science, a manual describing a method of elemental transformation that bypasses the immense energy requirements of modern nuclear physics. The scroll's methodology is what truly separates it from both legend and contemporary science. We know today, through particle accelerators and nuclear reactors, that transmuting one element into another is indeed possible. However, these processes require staggering amounts of energy, often producing radioactive and unstable isotopes in the process. The Hermetic Formula describes something entirely different, a low-energy process. It details the use of specific, resonant sound frequencies directed at a crucible containing the base metal and a small amount of a rare catalytic substance, a mysterious compound referred to only as the Red Lion's Tear. When the precise harmonic frequency is achieved, the text claims the molecular bonds of the lead undergo a fundamental reorganization, its atomic structure shifting in a cascade to become the stable, dense lattice of gold. This concept of using resonance to influence matter at a subatomic level is not completely alien to us. Modern quantum field theory suggests that all particles are essentially vibrational excitations in their respective fields. The Forbidden Scroll appears to be a practical application of this very principle, describing a technology that could manipulate those foundational vibrations to rewrite an element's identity. The economic implications of such a discovery were so terrifying to the powers of the past that they had no choice but to bury it. Throughout the Renaissance and into the Age of Enlightenment, European monarchies built their entire wealth and power structures on a foundation of gold and silver. Their currencies were based on the scarcity of these precious metals. The sudden introduction of a method to produce unlimited, perfect gold would have instantly collapsed the economy. Inflation would have run so rampant that a single loaf of bread might cost a wheelbarrow of gold coins. Kingdoms would have fallen, wars would have been unfunded, and the entire feudal and mercantile system would have evaporated overnight. It was not a matter of disbelief in the formula. It was a cold, calculated act of self-preservation. Royal sponsors who initially funded alchemical research quickly confiscated and locked away any successful results, often silencing the alchemists themselves to protect the fragile economic paradigm that kept them in power. The secret of transmutation became the most dangerous knowledge in the world, not because it was powerful magic, but because it was a technology that could obliterate wealth itself. Yet, the most profound aspect of the Hermetic Formula is its suggestion that the physical process is merely a mirror of a greater spiritual truth. The text draws a direct parallel between the transmutation of lead into gold and the transformation of the human soul. It proposes that just as a base metal burdened with impurities can be refined into a noble, incorruptible element, so too can the human consciousness, mired in base desires like greed, fear, and anger, be purified into a state of enlightened awareness. The same resonant frequencies that rearrange atoms, the scroll suggests, can be applied through meditation and focused intent to recalibrate the human energy field, dissolving psychic blockages and amplifying latent faculties of intuition and compassion. This is the true great work of alchemy, not the creation of monetary wealth, but the achievement of spiritual liberation. The physical gold was never the ultimate goal. It was merely a tangible proof of concept, a signpost indicating that the alchemist had mastered the universal principles of transformation. This beautiful synthesis of the material and the spiritual, of outer science and inner development, reveals a wisdom that sees no separation between the laws governing the physical universe and the path to personal enlightenment. From the alchemical transformation of matter and spirit, we now turn to the very bones of our planet and the mysterious structures built upon them. Imagine for a moment that you have stumbled upon the ultimate architectural codex, a master key that unlocks the secret purpose behind every great sacred site across the globe. This is the essence of our 10th forbidden passage, known as the Architect's Key to Sacred Dimensions. The story of its discovery is as dramatic as its contents. It was not found in a library or a royal tomb, but painstakingly decoded from a series of intricate stone reliefs deep within a previously unexplored Mayan pyramid in the Guatemalan rainforest. The decoding was the life's work of a brilliant but ostracized archaeologist, a man who defied his academic peers to pursue a theory that these sites were not just temples, but sophisticated technological devices. His work revealed that the precise dimensions of Stonehenge, the grand layout of Angkor Wat, and the celestial alignment of the Great Pyramid all share a common mathematical language, a set of geometric ratios and universal constants that appear to be woven into the fabric of reality itself. This key is built upon what we now recognize as sacred geometry, the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, and the precise value of pi, but its application goes far beyond mere aesthetics. The manuscript explains that when these ratios are translated into physical structures built at specific locations, they create a kind of resonant cavity that amplifies subtle energies emanating from the Earth and even from space. Think of these ancient monuments not as inert stone, but as cosmic antennas or acoustic lenses, carefully tuned to focus a natural energy that flows through and around our planet. This might sound like pure fantasy, but modern scientific investigations have added a layer of startling credibility. Teams using sensitive magnetometers and electromagnetic field detectors have consistently recorded anomalous readings at these locations. At sites like Stonehenge, for instance, researchers have documented powerful electromagnetic vortices, with energy levels spiking at certain times of the day or year, often coinciding with solstices or equinoxes. Similarly, inside the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, unusual microwave and ultrasonic emissions have been detected, suggesting these structures are interacting with energies that our conventional science is only beginning to measure and understand. The forbidden text takes this concept a critical step further by explaining the connection between these structures and the Earth's own energetic grid. It describes a planetary network of what are often called ley lines or telluric currents, invisible pathways of electromagnetic energy that crisscross the globe. The Architect's Key provides maps showing that the world's most powerful sacred sites are positioned precisely at the major nodes and intersections of this grid. The Great Pyramid sits at one of the most potent junctions, as does Machu Picchu, Easter Island, and the ancient city of Babylon. According to the manuscript, the builders understood that by constructing their geometrically perfect temples at these power spots, they could tap into, stabilize, and amplify the Earth's natural energy flow. This was not just for spiritual ceremonies. The text suggests these amplified energies were used for practical purposes like enhancing crop growth, healing the sick, and even facilitating heightened states of consciousness among the priests and initiates who worked within these charged environments. This profound understanding of the living Earth posed a direct and immediate threat to the powers that arrived in the New World. During the Spanish conquest of the Americas, Catholic missionaries, led by figures like Bishop Diego de Landa, systematically sought out and destroyed countless Mayan codices and Aztec texts. The official history tells us this was done to eradicate pagan idolatry, but the forbidden narrative suggests a more calculated motive. The Church recognized that the native spiritual power was intrinsically linked to these sacred sites and their underlying geometric science. By burning the codices that contained the Architect's Key and demolishing the temples themselves, they weren't just stamping out a competing religion. They were dismantling a functional technology and erasing the knowledge of how to build new power centers. They sought to sever the connection between the indigenous people and the energetic landscape, ensuring that no rival source of spiritual or even physical power could challenge the authority of the cross and the crown. It was an act of intellectual and energetic colonization as much as a military one. The tragedy of this suppression is magnified when we consider its implications for our modern world. The knowledge within the Architect's Key holds the potential to revolutionize how we build our cities and power our societies. Imagine a new form of architecture that doesn't fight against nature but harmonizes with it. Buildings designed with sacred geometric proportions could potentially tap into the Earth's own telluric currents to generate clean, limitless energy, eliminating our dependence on fossil fuels. Hospitals could be constructed on principles that promote healing by amplifying beneficial energy fields. The very design of our living spaces could be optimized to support human well-being and cognitive function, creating environments that nourish us rather than deplete us. This is not mere speculation. It is the logical application of a science that the ancients appear to have mastered. The loss of this blueprint represents one of history's greatest technological setbacks, a detour away from a path that could have led to a civilization living in sustainable harmony with the planet. The realization that our built environment can be a conscious partner in harnessing natural energy creates a perfect, resonant bridge to our next discovery, which explores how sound itself was used as a precise tool for shaping the physical world. Our 11th forbidden passage transports us from the silent geometry of sacred sites into the vibrant, invisible world of sound, with a text known as the Sonic Codex of Creation. This remarkable collection of Egyptian papyri, supposedly discovered in a long-concealed chamber beneath the Great Sphinx, presents a radical thesis that sound is not merely something we hear, but a fundamental creative and destructive force that can be wielded with the precision of a master sculptor's tool. The Codex moves far beyond the idea of simple acoustics, describing a sophisticated science of vibrational influence. It claims the massive stone blocks of the pyramids, which continue to baffle engineers with their multi-ton weight and perfect placement, were not hauled into position by sheer manpower alone. Instead, the text provides explicit instructions for using specific harmonic frequencies, generated by large groups of priests chanting in unison and striking precisely tuned metal plates to effectively negate gravity. According to the scrolls, these combined sonic fields could reduce the immense weight of the limestone blocks, allowing them to be guided into place with minimal physical effort, appearing to float up the rising structure as if by magic. This ancient concept finds a fascinating echo in a modern scientific field known as cymatics, which visually demonstrates how sound influences matter. In cymatics experiments, a thin layer of a substance like sand or water is placed on a metal plate, and when specific sound frequencies are played through it, the particles instantly arrange themselves into intricate geometric patterns. A low frequency might produce a simple circle, while a higher, more complex tone can create stunning mandala-like shapes with perfect symmetry. This provides a tangible, observable bridge to the claims of the sonic codex. If sound can so elegantly organize inert particles on a plate, the logical next question is whether more powerful, focused frequencies could influence larger, more complex structures, perhaps even the molecular lattice of a solid granite block. This isn't just theoretical. Modern medical science already harnesses this principle with therapeutic ultrasound, using high-frequency sound waves to break up kidney stones, promote deep tissue healing, and even target cancer cells with pinpoint accuracy, proving that sound can indeed enact powerful physical changes within the body. The Codex suggests that the Egyptian priesthood elevated this understanding to an art form, using their knowledge of sonic harmonics to perform feats that would have been perceived as divine miracles by the common population. The text describes rituals where specific sequences of vocal tones, sung in the resonant chambers of temples, were used to accelerate the healing of wounds, purify water, and even promote the rapid growth of crops. These wouldn't have been random chants, but meticulously calibrated frequencies designed to resonate with the human body's own energy field, the molecular structure of water, or the cellular processes of plants. To an observer without this knowledge, a priest healing a severe infection with a sustained, resonant hum would be a clear act of godlike power. This ability to produce seemingly supernatural results through an applied, repeatable science granted the priesthood immense authority and solidified their role as the essential intermediaries between the people and the gods. This is precisely why such knowledge became a forbidden passage, actively suppressed by subsequent religious hierarchies. The power of an institution often rests on its control over the miraculous and the unexplained. If the common person understood that these awe-inspiring feats were not gifts from a deity channeled exclusively through a priestly class, but were instead the result of a learnable, physical science of vibration, the entire foundation of religious authority would crumble. The mystery would be gone, replaced by a democratized understanding that anyone with the right training and knowledge could potentially harness these natural forces. The guardians of the Sonic Codex likely realized that its widespread release would dismantle the social order, transforming a population of devoted followers into a society of potential practitioners who no longer needed a theological middleman to interact with the fundamental forces of the universe. Yet the Codex concludes with a sobering and critically important warning, one that carries immense weight in our own era of sonic technology. It explicitly cautions that for every frequency that creates harmony and healing, there is a counterpart that can induce chaos and disintegration. The text describes experiments gone awry, where improper resonant frequencies caused crystalline structures to shatter into dust, water to become toxic and undrinkable, and even living tissue to rapidly deteriorate. This is a terrifyingly real principle. We know that certain low-frequency infrasounds, while inaudible to the human ear, can cause feelings of dread, nausea, and even visual hallucinations. The Forbidden Manuscript suggests that the ancient adepts understood that sound sits on a dangerous knife edge, holding the potential for both creation and destruction, and that wielding it without deep wisdom and ethical responsibility could unleash catastrophic effects on the material world, destabilizing the very molecular foundations of reality itself. As we consider the immense power of sound to shape our reality, it naturally leads us to wonder about the very ground beneath our feet and the energies that might flow through it. This brings us to our 12th forbidden passage, a document that could rewrite our understanding of Earth itself, the Telluric Currents Map. Imagine a beautifully illustrated pre-Columbian manuscript crafted from treated deerskin and vibrant mineral pigments, not depicting gods or battles, but a stunningly accurate web of glowing lines crisscrossing the continents and oceans. This is not a mythical creation, but what appears to be a sophisticated technical diagram of the planet's circulatory system. The map identifies specific, powerful nodes where these subterranean energy pathways intersect, and astonishingly, every single one corresponds to a known sacred site: the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, and the ancient temples of Angkor Wat. The clear implication is that these cultures did not choose these locations randomly for their beauty or defensibility. They selected them with precise scientific knowledge, building their most important structures directly atop the Earth's most potent energy hotspots to act as conduits or taps for this natural power. The science behind this map is both confirmed and disputed by modern geology. Geologists have long acknowledged the existence of telluric currents. These are natural, extremely low-frequency electrical currents that flow through the Earth's crust and mantle, generated by a combination of the planet's rotation, its magnetic field, and interactions with the solar wind. We can measure these currents, and they are a very real phenomenon. Where the forbidden manuscript radically diverges from conventional science is in its claim about the application of this knowledge. Modern geology views these currents as a passive natural occurrence, but the ancient text describes them as a usable resource. It presents these global energy flows not as a geological curiosity, but as a functional grid, a planetary power supply that ancient engineers learned to access. This perspective reframes these sacred sites from being purely spiritual centers to something resembling prehistoric power plants or communication hubs, operating on a clean, limitless energy source that has been flowing uninterrupted for millennia, completely unnoticed by our modern infrastructure. The methods described for harnessing this energy are where the text moves from theoretical to truly revolutionary. The manuscript provides explicit instructions for constructing what it calls Earth energy resonators. These devices are described as intricate arrays of specific types of crystals, particularly quartz and tourmaline for their piezoelectric properties, set within precisely wound copper coils and housed in stone chambers built directly on the telluric nodes. The text explains that the crystals act as transducers, converting the subtle, constant flow of Earth's electrical current into a more usable form of energy, while the copper coils amplify and focus it. This technology, if it worked as described, would be the ultimate power source, decentralized, completely free after the initial setup, non-polluting, and available anywhere on the planet's energy grid. It suggests a civilization that had solved the energy crisis thousands of years before the Industrial Revolution ever thought to burn its first lump of coal. This vision of abundant, free power is precisely what makes the suppression of the Telluric Currents Map so tragically understandable from a modern economic perspective. Imagine the impact on our world if such a technology were to be rediscovered and implemented today. The entire global economic framework, which is heavily reliant on the extraction, sale, and consumption of fossil fuels, would collapse overnight. Trillion-dollar industries built around oil, gas, and coal would become obsolete. The geopolitical landscape, shaped for over a century by the control of energy resources, would be utterly transformed. It is not difficult to believe that powerful industrial interests, upon learning of such a manuscript's existence, would have a compelling motive to ensure it remained hidden. The promise of free energy isn't just a threat to profits, it's a threat to the very structure of global power and control, which has so often been exercised through the management of scarcity. The map represents a key to a post-scarcity world, and for those who benefit from the current system, that key is far too dangerous to be allowed into the public's hands. Yet, the manuscript concludes with a warning that carries a profound ecological and ethical weight, one that resonates deeply with our current environmental challenges. It explicitly cautions that the Telluric network is a delicate, living system. The text states that while tapping into these currents gently, in harmony with their natural flow, is beneficial, large-scale or forceful extraction can have catastrophic consequences. It draws a direct line between disrupting these deep earth energies and triggering geological instability, specifically mentioning events we would recognize as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. This presents a haunting possibility. It suggests that the fall of certain advanced ancient civilizations might not have been due to war or invasion, but to a catastrophic failure of their own energy technology, a telluric meltdown that literally shook their world apart. This idea that our planet's stability is intrinsically linked to energies we are only beginning to perceive forces a complete re-evaluation of our relationship with the Earth, moving from seeing it as a resource to be exploited to understanding it as a complex, energetic being with which we must learn to coexist in balance. This profound connection between planetary energy and global climate patterns creates a direct and urgent pathway to our next discovery. Our journey into the forbidden now takes us high into the Andes Mountains, to a discovery that challenges our very understanding of humanity's relationship with the sky. The 13th forbidden passage, known as the weather manipulation glyphs, was not found on parchment or stone, but encoded into an intricate collection of Inca quipu strings, discovered perfectly preserved in a dry, sealed cave at an altitude that takes one's breath away. Quipu are often described as simple recording devices using knots, but this particular set, with its unique color patterns and complex weaves, revealed something far more extraordinary. When deciphered by a linguist specializing in lost Andean languages, the strings unveiled a precise, technical manual for interacting with the atmosphere. This wasn't a prayer for rain. It was a set of instructions explaining how specific, massive rock formations in the Andes were arranged to create standing wave patterns in the wind, and how ceremonial gatherings, using rhythmic drumming and chanting at exact frequencies, could encourage the condensation of water vapor in the air, effectively summoning clouds and directing rainfall to specific valleys. The sophistication of this ancient practice finds a direct, if cruder, parallel in our modern world. Since the 1940s, scientists have engaged in weather modification through cloud seeding, where particles of silver iodide or dry ice are dispersed into clouds to encourage rainfall. While this modern technique has had mixed and often debated results, the forbidden glyphs suggest the Inca and their predecessors achieved a level of precision we can only dream of. The text describes not just making rain, but a comprehensive system of atmospheric management. It details methods for dispersing fog, redirecting hailstorms away from crops, and even creating subtle pressure differentials to guide seasonal wind patterns, ensuring that moisture-laden air from the Amazon basin was funneled precisely into the high-altitude agricultural terraces that fed their empire. This implies a deep, systemic understanding of microclimates and fluid dynamics, treating the weather not as an uncontrollable force of nature, but as a complex system that could be gently nudged and guided with the right applied knowledge. The Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire provides the clear and brutal context for why this knowledge was violently suppressed. When the conquistadors arrived, they witnessed a civilization thriving in one of the world's most challenging environments. The Inca capital of Cusco was a marvel of urban planning, with sophisticated aqueducts and terraced farms that seemed to defy the arid mountain climate. The Spanish quickly came to understand that this agricultural abundance was not a lucky accident. It was managed. They learned that Inca priests and weather masters held ceremonies that appeared to directly influence the success or failure of the harvest. Recognizing that this control over the food supply was a primary source of the Inca state's power and stability, the Spanish systematically sought out and destroyed these quipu records. They burned the repositories of knowledge and executed the specialists who could read them. This was a strategic move to break the back of the native civilization, eliminating their ability to independently feed their population and making them utterly dependent on and subservient to the new colonial order. It was an act of intellectual warfare designed to shatter the technological backbone of a society. Perhaps the most profound and unsettling insight from the weather manipulation glyphs is their long-term perspective on climate. The texts do not speak of a static, unchanging atmosphere. Instead, they describe grand, multi-generational cycles of drying and wetting, of warming and cooling that unfold over centuries. The glyphs suggest that the ancient Andean cultures not only knew about these cycles, but had developed their agricultural and social structures to adapt to them. They built vast networks of storehouses to survive multi-year droughts and developed water management systems that could handle both scarcity and abundance. This presents a radical challenge to our contemporary climate change narrative. While there is overwhelming scientific consensus that modern human activity is drastically accelerating global warming, the glyphs introduce the haunting possibility that the underlying drivers of climate shift are part of a much older planetary rhythm. The terrifying implication is that our current global crisis might be the collision of a natural downturn in one of these cycles with the unprecedented impact of industrial pollution, creating a perfect storm that ancient protocols designed for a pre-industrial world would be insufficient to navigate. This leads us directly to the immense ethical dilemma at the heart of this forbidden knowledge, a dilemma that remains just as potent today. The power to control the weather is arguably the ultimate form of power. In the hands of a benevolent and wise leadership, it could end droughts, prevent famines, and mitigate natural disasters, creating a global paradise of agricultural stability. But in the hands of a malevolent or even simply competitive state, it becomes the ultimate weapon. Imagine a nation subtly altering the jet stream to plunge a rival's farmland into perpetual drought, or triggering catastrophic flooding to destroy an enemy's infrastructure, all while maintaining plausible deniability. The very concept of war would be transformed from conflicts between armies to assaults on the environment itself, with civilian populations as the primary casualties. The Inca glyphs, despite their benevolent application, carry this implicit warning. Any technology potent enough to feed millions is also potent enough to starve millions, and the decision of who holds that power and for what purpose becomes the most critical question a society can face. This sobering realization about the potential for large-scale influence over human systems creates a natural and unsettling transition to our next passage, which explores techniques for shaping something even more fundamental than the weather, the human mind itself. Now we arrive at a forbidden passage that ventures into the very architecture of the human mind itself, a set of Sumerian clay tablets known as the Mass Consciousness Protocols. Picture the oldest written records known to man, not just detailing kings and harvests, but containing a startlingly advanced understanding of social psychology and group dynamics. These tablets, excavated from the ruins of a ziggurat in what was once ancient Mesopotamia, describe how the ruling priest-kings used their temples not merely as places of worship, but as sophisticated psychological instruments. The text meticulously explains that by combining specific, repetitive visual symbols, the hypnotic rhythm of drums and chanting, and the strategic arrangement of crowds within architecturally resonant spaces, they could induce a collective, highly suggestible mental state in the entire population. It was a technology of influence carved in clay, a manual for harmonizing, or more dangerously, homogenizing the thoughts and beliefs of thousands of people at once. The mechanisms detailed in the protocols are eerily familiar to us today, even if we don't recognize them as such. The tablets describe what we would now call neuro-linguistic programming and classical conditioning, but applied on a civilizational scale. For instance, they instructed that all temple walls be adorned with the same, simple symbol of the ruling deity. This symbol wasn't just art, it was a visual trigger, repeated everywhere until it bypassed conscious thought and lodged directly in the subconscious, creating an automatic association of authority and divinity. The rituals themselves were engineered for maximum psychological impact. The monotonous, rhythmic beating of drums at a specific frequency matching the human heart rate would slowly synchronize the brainwaves of the crowd, lulling them into a more receptive, less critical state of awareness. Then the chanting would begin, simple, powerful phrases repeated in unison, using the acoustic properties of the temple to create a surround sound effect that felt less like a human voice and more like a command from the universe itself. This ancient science of mass influence did not remain buried with the Sumerian cities. The principles encoded in these protocols have been unconsciously rediscovered and deployed by powerful institutions throughout history. Look at the soaring architecture of medieval cathedrals, designed to make an individual feel small and insignificant, while the light streams dramatically onto an altar, focusing all attention. Observe the military parade with its synchronized marching, uniform clothing, and powerful, repetitive slogans, all techniques to dissolve individual identity into a collective whole. In our modern world, these very same principles are the engine of advertising and political campaigns. The jingle you can't get out of your head, the political slogan repeated across every media platform, the carefully crafted logo that evokes trust or desire, these are all modern, commercialized echoes of the Sumerian priest-king standing before an entranced crowd. The protocols reveal that the levers of mass persuasion are not a modern invention, but a very old art refined over millennia. It is precisely this potent effectiveness that led revolutionary movements, from the French Revolution to various anti-colonial struggles, to actively seek out and destroy such knowledge whenever they toppled an oppressive regime. They understood that these psychological tools were not inherently good or evil, they were simply power. A system that could use them to build devotion to a king could just as easily be used to build devotion to a new state ideology. The revolutionaries feared that if these protocols fell into the hands of their own emerging leadership, the cycle of manipulation would simply continue under a new name. Their goal was not to master the art of mass control, but to shatter it entirely, hoping to create a society of free-thinking individuals who could not be so easily led. This destructive act was a desperate attempt to break a chain of influence that stretched back to the dawn of civilization itself. The most crucial warning within the Sumerian tablets, and the reason they were ultimately sealed away by a faction of the priesthood itself, addresses this very ethical abyss. The text makes a critical distinction between societal cohesion and outright manipulation. Used with ethical guidance, these techniques could, in theory, help reinforce positive social bonds, encourage pro-social behavior, and create a powerful sense of shared purpose during times of crisis. However, the protocols sternly warn that without this moral compass, these methods inevitably lead to an infantilized population, a society of followers who have surrendered their capacity for critical thought and independent judgment. The goal shifts from enlightenment, helping people reach a higher state of understanding, to mere control, keeping people predictable, docile, and easy to manage for the benefit of a ruling class. This is the eternal danger of this forbidden knowledge. It offers a shortcut to stability that bypasses the messy, difficult work of truly educating and empowering a citizenry. Understanding that our very thoughts and beliefs can be shaped by unseen architectural and psychological forces is a deeply unsettling realization. It forces us to look at our own world with new eyes, to question the symbols that surround us, the rhythms that move us, and the crowds we join. The mass consciousness protocols ultimately serve as a timeless mirror, reflecting the perpetual tension between the individual and the collective, and challenging us to build societies that elevate human consciousness rather than merely programming it. This profound exploration of how external forces can shape our inner world creates a powerful bridge to our next discovery, which turns inward to examine the hidden biological knowledge our bodies may hold, waiting to be unlocked. Our exploration of the mass mind now turns inward to a forbidden passage that speaks to humanity's most intimate and universal struggle, the battle against disease and the slow creep of time itself. Deep within the silent, snow-bound confines of a Himalayan monastery, guarded by monks who have dedicated their lives to its preservation, lies a text known as the Panacea Formula. This is not a mere collection of herbal recipes. It is an ancient Ayurvedic manuscript of breathtaking scope, a comprehensive system of health that claims to offer a single, universal remedy capable of addressing every ailment, from the common cold to the most aggressive forms of cancer and even the very process of aging. The text describes this not as a magic pill, but as a profound restorative process, a multi-stage protocol involving complex herbal compounds derived from rare high-altitude plants, intensive detoxification rituals using purified metals and clays, and a complete restructuring of one's daily rhythms to align with the cycles of nature. It presents a vision of the human body not as a collection of separate organs to be treated in isolation, but as a single, integrated energetic system whose flawless function is our natural birthright. The claims of such a universal cure are, of course, met with immediate skepticism by the rigid framework of modern allopathic medicine. The conventional scientific view rightly points out that diseases have vastly different mechanisms. A virus operates nothing like a cancerous tumor or a degenerative brain condition. To suggest one remedy could address them all seems to defy biological logic. However, a fascinating and controversial area of modern pharmacological research offers a sliver of a parallel. Scientists investigating what are known as Panacea interference compounds have observed that certain natural substances, particularly complex plant polyphenols, can create false positives in laboratory tests by interfering with the assay mechanisms themselves, making it appear as if they are effective against a wide range of unrelated cellular targets. While this is typically cited as a reason to dismiss many traditional remedies, the forbidden manuscript reframes this phenomenon. It suggests that these substances are not interfering but are instead operating on a more fundamental level, acting as broad-spectrum signaling molecules that help reset cellular communication and restore the body's innate systemic intelligence to identify and eliminate dysfunction, regardless of its specific manifestation. The historical suppression of the Panacea Formula reveals a startling alliance of opposing forces, a rare case where both colonial powers and traditional guardians conspired, for vastly different reasons, to keep this knowledge hidden. When European empires expanded into India and the East, they encountered medical systems that were thousands of years old and often more effective at treating local diseases than their own primitive practices like bloodletting. Recognizing the threat, colonial administrators and the emerging Western pharmaceutical industry actively worked to discredit and suppress Ayurvedic and other traditional knowledge. They labeled it as superstition, seized and locked away texts, and established a medical monopoly that created a lucrative market for their own patented synthetic drugs. The universal, nearly free remedy promised by the Panacea Formula was a direct threat to this new, profit-driven model of healthcare. Conversely, the traditional healers who had stewarded this knowledge for generations also feared its release. They understood that in the hands of corporations, the formula would be stripped of its spiritual context, synthetically replicated, and sold as a commodity, destroying its sacred integrity and potentially causing harm when used without the essential ethical and mental preparations it required. This last point is the true heart of the forbidden text and the reason it represents such a radical challenge to our modern worldview. The Panacea Formula relentlessly emphasizes that its herbal and physical protocols are completely inert, even potentially dangerous, if undertaken without their essential counterpart, a dedicated regimen of spiritual practices. The manuscript dictates specific meditations for cultivating compassion, detailed visualizations for directing healing energy throughout the body, and strict ethical observances that prohibit harm to any living creature. It posits that disease, at its core, begins as a disruption in the subtle energy body, a knot of negative emotion or spiritual dissonance that only later manifests as physical pathology. The herbs and detoxifications are merely the physical keys that unlock the body's own healing potential. But that potential can only be fully activated by a mind that is calm, focused, and aligned with a higher purpose. This is not a vague spiritual suggestion. It is presented as a non-negotiable biochemical reality. The mind and body are not two separate entities, but a single, dynamic continuum, and to heal one without the other is to merely prune the branches of a weed while leaving its root intact. This holistic vision, once dismissed as mystical nonsense, is now finding powerful validation at the very frontiers of medical science. The field of psychoneuroimmunology has meticulously documented how our thoughts, beliefs, and emotional states directly influence our nervous system, hormone levels, and immune function. Chronic stress, for instance, has been proven to suppress immune response and accelerate cellular aging, while practices like meditation and mindfulness have been shown to reduce inflammation, improve genetic repair mechanisms, and even lengthen telomeres, the protective caps on our chromosomes that are a key marker of biological age. The ancient rishis who composed the Panacea Formula would say modern science is simply proving what they always knew, that consciousness is the ultimate medicine. The manuscript's greatest forbidden truth is that perfect health is not something we find in a bottle or a procedure, but a state we co-create through the inseparable partnership of a purified body, a tranquil mind, and a spirit connected to the whole of life. This profound understanding that our daily sustenance is the very foundation upon which this temple of health is built creates a seamless transition to our next discovery, which delves into the ancient secrets of what we eat. What if the key to living for centuries was not a mythical fountain of youth or a complex genetic treatment, but something as simple and accessible as the food on your plate? Our journey into forbidden knowledge now takes us to the stark and beautiful deserts surrounding the Dead Sea, where a collection of scrolls attributed to the reclusive Essene community presents a revolutionary concept that directly confronts our understanding of the human lifespan. This 16th forbidden passage, known as the longevity diet of the ancients, is not a list of magical potions, but a meticulous and sophisticated nutritional protocol. The text describes specific, synergistic food combinations, like pairing certain legumes with particular seeds to create a complete protein profile, or consuming fermented grains at precise times of the day to optimize gut flora. It outlines rigorous fasting cycles that align with lunar phases and seasonal changes, and prescribes mineral supplements derived from Dead Sea salts and high-altitude clays, claiming this comprehensive regime was the secret behind the extraordinary lifespans attributed to patriarchs like Methuselah, who the Bible says lived for 969 years. This manuscript frames these legendary ages not as symbolic or mythological, but as the achievable biological outcome of a lost science of sustenance. The truly startling aspect of this ancient text is how its core principles are being independently validated by modern scientific research. For decades, studies in laboratories around the world have consistently shown that calorie restriction, reducing overall food intake without malnutrition, is one of the most reliable ways to extend the lifespan of organisms from yeast and worms to mice and monkeys. This practice appears to trigger beneficial cellular pathways, enhancing DNA repair and reducing inflammation, which are key drivers of aging. Furthermore, the practice of intermittent fasting, which the Essene scrolls describe in detail with their sunrise to sunset eating windows, has exploded in popularity for its documented benefits on metabolic health, insulin sensitivity, and cellular cleansing through a process called autophagy. Perhaps the most compelling real-world evidence comes from the study of so-called blue zones regions like Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, and Loma Linda, California, where populations routinely live active, healthy lives past 100 years. Researchers have found that their diets share uncanny similarities with the Essene prescriptions. They are predominantly plant-based, rich in legumes and whole grains, low in processed foods and sugar, and often incorporate natural periods of fasting or calorie awareness. It seems modern science is now mapping the very same longevity pathways that this forbidden text described millennia ago. So why would such a beneficial and life-affirming knowledge be deliberately suppressed? The answer lies in the profound threat it posed to religious and social control structures. For much of human history, religious institutions derived a significant portion of their authority from their role as the mediators between humanity and the divine, and a core part of that relationship was explaining the great mysteries of life and death. Mortality, the certainty of a finite earthly existence, was a fundamental pillar of this worldview. It was the very condition that made faith, redemption, and the promise of an afterlife necessary. If a simple dietary regimen, accessible to anyone without the need for priestly intercession, could radically extend a person's healthy life for centuries, it would shatter this foundational doctrine. Why would one focus on the afterlife if a vibrant, extended life here on Earth was a tangible possibility? The established religious authorities, fearing the erosion of their influence, had a powerful incentive to classify these scrolls as heretical and lock them away, ensuring that mortality remained an unchangeable human condition, thereby preserving the theological framework that kept them in power. The most radical and challenging idea within the longevity diet of the ancients is its fundamental premise about the nature of aging itself. The text argues that what we perceive as the inevitable decline of aging is not primarily written into an unchangeable genetic program. Instead, it posits that aging is largely a cumulative result of nutritional and energetic deficiencies. It suggests that the standard human diet, even in ancient times, provided enough energy for basic survival and reproduction, but failed to supply the deeper, more subtle nutrients and energy required for the body's long-term maintenance and cellular rejuvenation. The scrolls describe a concept similar to what we now call hormesis, the idea that mild, intermittent stressors like fasting actually make the body stronger and more resilient. This perspective turns modern healthcare assumptions on their head. Our current system is predominantly reactive, focused on treating diseases of aging like cancer, heart disease, and dementia after they manifest. The Essene approach is profoundly proactive, suggesting that by providing the body with the correct informational signals through food and fasting, we can prevent these degenerative processes from gaining a foothold in the first place, effectively compressing the period of morbidity and extending our health span to match a vastly lengthened lifespan. This paradigm shift forces us to reconsider our entire relationship with food. The Forbidden Manuscript teaches that food is far more than just fuel or a source of pleasure. It is a complex source of information that communicates directly with our genes, instructing them on whether to express health and vitality or decay and disease. Every bite we take is either a step toward activating the body's innate longevity pathways or a step toward accelerating the aging process. The ancient diet detailed in the scrolls, rich in wild greens, bitter herbs, sprouted grains, and fermented foods, is a symphony of these positive instructions designed to reduce inflammation, alkalize the body, and support mitochondrial function. This stands in stark contrast to the modern processed food landscape, which the text would likely describe as a cacophony of confusing and damaging signals that promote cellular chaos. The ultimate forbidden truth of this passage is that we have been given, within our own biology and the natural world, all the tools we need to live extraordinarily long and healthy lives. The secret was not lost to time, but was actively hidden, creating a collective amnesia about our own potential for vitality that we are only now, through painstaking scientific inquiry, beginning to wake up from. This profound realization that our physical vessel can be maintained and enhanced through specific, conscious practices naturally guides our curiosity inward to the untapped potential of the mind itself and the psychological techniques that were similarly deemed too empowering for the general populace. Imagine being able to attend a lecture or read an entire book just once, and then recall every single word, every fact, every intricate detail with perfect clarity, not just for days but for a lifetime. This is the extraordinary promise held within our 17th forbidden passage, a set of Greek texts known collectively as the Memory Palace Enhancement method. Concealed for centuries in the most restricted vaults of the Vatican's secret archives, these manuscripts do not describe a magical potion or a biological implant, but a systematic and trainable technique of the mind. The texts explain how legendary orators like Cicero and Simonides of Chios could deliver speeches lasting for hours without a single note, and how scholars could supposedly memorize the entire contents of the Library of Alexandria by mentally walking through its corridors. The method is deceptively simple in its principle, yet almost infinitely powerful in its application. It involves constructing an elaborate imaginary palace within your mind's eye, a place you know intimately like your own home. Then you take the information you wish to remember and transform it into vivid, bizarre, and emotionally charged images, which you then place along a specific route through this palace. To recall the information, you simply take a mental walk through your palace, observing the strange scenes you left there, which then trigger the memory of the original facts or ideas in perfect sequence. The reason this technique works so spectacularly well is now being illuminated by modern neuroscience, and the findings confirm what the ancients intuitively understood. When you use your spatial memory to navigate your mental palace, you are activating the hippocampus, a brain region crucial for both memory and navigation. When you create bizarre and emotionally resonant images, you are engaging the amygdala, which tags memories with emotional significance, making them stickier and more durable. And when you visualize these scenes in rich sensory detail, you are firing up the visual and sensory cortices. This multi-sensory, multi-region approach creates a robust neural web for each memory, making it far more resistant to being forgotten than a fact learned by simple, repetitive rote memorization. Brain scans of modern memory athletes who use these exact techniques to memorize the order of a shuffled deck of cards in seconds or hundreds of random binary digits in minutes show that their brains are not structurally different from anyone else's. Instead, during memorization, they display a dramatic and synchronized increase in activity across this entire network of brain regions. The forbidden Greek text was not describing a superpower reserved for a gifted few. It was outlining the user's manual for the standard-issue human brain, a manual that was deliberately kept out of the hands of the general public. This leads us directly to the unsettling reason for its suppression. Throughout history, from the priestly classes of ancient Egypt to the scholastic elites of medieval Europe, power was intrinsically linked to the control of knowledge. In an age before the printing press made books widely available, the ability to hold vast stores of information in one's own mind was the ultimate source of authority and influence. A priest who could quote any passage of scripture from memory held divine authority. A scholar who had memorized entire fields of philosophy or law was considered a master. A politician who could speak for hours without notes commanded awe and respect. The memory palace technique was the key to this intellectual dominance. By restricting its teaching to a small, initiated elite, often within monastic orders or exclusive academic guilds, these power structures maintained a formidable intellectual monopoly. They became the living libraries, the indispensable repositories of all societal knowledge, ensuring that the masses remained dependent on them for access to information, law, and even spiritual guidance. The democratization of this memory technique would have leveled the intellectual playing field, empowering common citizens to retain complex legal arguments, challenge doctrinal interpretations, and build their own bases of knowledge, thereby eroding the very pillars of institutional control. But the most profound and truly forbidden claim within the Vatican manuscripts goes far beyond memorizing speeches or books. The text makes the staggering assertion that a mind sufficiently trained and expanded through these methods could potentially access realms of memory that are not personally its own. It hints at the possibility of tapping into what the philosopher Carl Jung would later call the collective unconscious, a deep, shared reservoir of ancestral experiences and archetypal images common to all humanity. The Greek text suggests that the neural architecture we use to store our personal memories might also serve as a receiver, able to tune into the residual impressions of our ancestors or even glimpse potential future events as probabilistic echoes. This is not presented as mystical channeling, but as a natural, albeit highly refined, function of a fully optimized human brain. It proposes that the barrier between personal and transpersonal memory is not a solid wall, but a permeable membrane, and that techniques like the memory palace don't just store new information, but actually expand the bandwidth of our consciousness, allowing us to perceive a broader spectrum of reality that exists both within and beyond our individual life experiences. This radical idea forces us to completely reconsider the limits of human potential. We tend to think of our brain as a finite hard drive with a fixed amount of storage space. The forbidden passage, supported by the plastic and adaptable nature of the brain revealed by modern neuroscience, suggests the opposite. Our neural architecture is more like a muscle that can be strengthened and a network that can be refined. By training our memory, we are not just filling a container, we are upgrading the processor and expanding the operating system itself. The ability to recall vast amounts of information with ease would fundamentally alter our education systems, our professions, and our very relationship with learning. It would foster a society of deep, cumulative knowledge rather than one of superficial, quickly forgotten facts. The ultimate secret of the memory palace is that it unlocks not just memory, but a heightened form of cognition, a clarity of thought that comes from having immediate access to the entire library of one's mind. This incredible journey into the enhanced mind, exploring the very frontiers of remembered experience, creates a powerful and natural curiosity about the other great realm of human consciousness, the mysterious world of dreams, where our minds construct realities every bit as vivid and meaningful as our waking hours. Now we venture into the mysterious landscape of the night, to a forbidden text that challenges the very nature of sleep itself. Imagine ancient Tibetan manuscripts, meticulously copied by monks in isolated mountain retreats, containing not prayers for the afterlife, but a practical guidebook for navigating the world of dreams with full, waking consciousness. This 18th forbidden passage, known as the Oneironaut's Guide to Lucid Dreaming, reframes our nightly journey not as a passive state of unconsciousness, but as a vast, explorable territory. The text uses the term Oneironaut, which literally means dream sailor, to describe an individual trained to remain aware while the body sleeps, transforming the dream from a confusing sequence of images into a deliberate experience where the dreamer can fly, converse with dream characters, alter the environment, and probe the deepest corners of their own psyche. This was not considered a mere curiosity. The manuscripts present it as a profound tool for spiritual development and practical problem solving, a way to consult the inner self on matters that baffle the waking mind. The techniques described in the guide are both simple in concept and demanding in practice, requiring a discipline that bridges the waking and sleeping worlds. One foundational method is reality testing, where the aspirant cultivates a habit throughout the day of questioning whether they are awake or dreaming, meticulously examining their surroundings and their own state of consciousness. This habit, performed dozens of times daily, eventually carries over into the dream state, triggering a moment of stunning clarity when the dreamer suddenly realizes, "I am dreaming." Another technique involves the wake back to bed method, where the practitioner wakes after several hours of sleep, remains awake for a short period of focused intention, and then returns to sleep while concentrating on maintaining their awareness as they cross the threshold back into the dream world. The most advanced practices involve deep meditation before sleep, focusing on a specific question or intention and holding it in the mind as one drifts off, effectively programming the dream to provide answers or specific experiences. The guide is filled with accounts of monks using these methods to overcome fears, receive artistic inspiration, and even solve complex philosophical dilemmas, all within the safe and limitless laboratory of the lucid dream. For centuries, the scientific establishment largely dismissed lucid dreaming as fantasy or superstition. This changed radically in the 1970s when researchers like Dr. Stephen LaBerge provided irrefutable empirical proof of its existence. In a landmark sleep laboratory experiment, participants who had become skilled in lucid dreaming were instructed to, upon becoming lucid, perform a pre-agreed upon set of eye movements, such as looking left-right while still in the dream state and hooked up to electroencephalogram machines. The machines recorded the distinct brainwave patterns of REM sleep, confirming the subjects were physiologically asleep, while simultaneously capturing the precise, voluntary eye movement signals from within the dream. This breakthrough opened the door to a new field of study, and modern research has since uncovered remarkable applications. therapists now use lucid dreaming techniques to help patients confront and overcome recurring nightmares, especially in cases of post-traumatic stress disorder, by allowing them to face their fears in an environment they know is not real. Artists, inventors, and scientists also report using lucid dreams as a source of boundless creativity, accessing novel ideas and solutions that seem to arise from a wellspring deeper than their conscious thought. The suppression of this knowledge becomes perfectly clear when we consider its power to bypass traditional authorities. Throughout history, access to the subconscious and the realm of spiritual insight was carefully mediated. One would confess to a priest to understand their hidden sins or visit a psychologist to have their dreams interpreted, placing the power of analysis and absolution in the hands of a designated expert. The Oneironaut's guide rendered these gatekeepers obsolete. It provided a direct, unmediated path for any individual to converse with their own subconscious, to receive their own symbolic revelations, and to find their own answers to spiritual and psychological dilemmas. A person could literally sit down with a dream figure representing their anxiety or their creativity and have a conversation, asking it what it needs or what message it carries. This kind of self-sufficient empowerment was deeply threatening to any institution whose authority relied on being the sole interpreter of inner truth. The monastic orders that guarded these texts likely feared that in the wrong hands, without the proper ethical and spiritual preparation, this power could lead to spiritual inflation or a dangerous blurring of the lines between dream reality and consensus reality. Perhaps the most profound and truly forbidden idea within the Tibetan manuscripts is their radical suggestion about the very nature of dreams. While modern neuroscience typically views dreams as the brain's internal process of sorting memories and processing emotions essentially, random neural firing interpreted by a mind trying to make a story, the Oneironaut's guide proposes a far more interconnected vision. It hints that the dream world is not entirely a private, internal theater, but may be a shared psychic realm, a collective landscape where consciousness can, under certain conditions, interact. The text describes advanced practitioners meeting in what it calls shared dream spaces, mutually constructed environments where they could exchange information that was later verified in the waking world. It even suggests that some dream figures are not mere projections of the self, but autonomous intelligences or echoes of other dreamers. This transforms the dream from a solitary neurological event into a potential meeting ground, a dimension where the boundaries between individual minds become porous. This astonishing concept that our most private mental experiences might actually be a form of subtle interaction with a broader field of consciousness completely redefines our place in the universe and creates a fascinating conceptual bridge to our next discovery, which explores the possibility of crossing another seemingly unbridgeable communication gap. From the boundless dreamscape of the human mind, we now turn our attention to another seemingly impenetrable world, the rich and varied languages of the animals who share our planet. Our 19th forbidden passage, known as the Animal Tongue Lexicon, emerges from the dry Egyptian sands, a collection of papyri that presents a concept so beautiful it feels almost like a fairy tale, yet is grounded in a science we are only beginning to grasp. Imagine scrolls that do not simply describe animal behavior, but instead offer a practical guide for dialogue. These texts contain intricate phonetic guides for approximating the complex vocalizations of dolphins, complete with notations for the clicks, whistles, and pulsed calls that form their unique dialects. They detail the specific postures, ear positions, and tail flicks that convey meaning in the world of wolves and big cats, and even document the subtle, low-frequency rumbles of elephants that travel for miles through the ground, explaining how to sense these vibrations and understand the social news they carry. This was not a one-sided effort at command. but a lexicon for mutual conversation, a bridge built to a world we have long considered silent. What makes this forbidden text so revolutionary is how it directly challenges centuries of scientific dogma, and how modern research is now independently vindicating its core premise. For a long time, the prevailing view in Western science, heavily influenced by Cartesian philosophy, was that animals were little more than biological automata, unfeeling machines that produced sounds as simple reflexes without true meaning or intent. This perspective provided a convenient moral justification for treating them as property or resources. The animal tongue lexicon, however, insists on the opposite. It treats each species as possessing a unique culture and a sophisticated communication system. Today, we are catching up. Bioacoustics researchers have discovered that dolphin signature whistles function much like individual names, and that pods have distinct vocal traditions passed down from mother to calf. Studies of prairie dogs show their alarm calls can describe a potential predator's species, size, shape, and even the color of a human's shirt. Certain bird species, like the Japanese tit, have been found to combine specific calls into what linguists call a syntax, creating a primitive sentence with a meaning different from its parts. The ancient Egyptians, it seems, were not engaging in poetic fantasy. They were documenting a complex reality that our own science, burdened by prejudice, took millennia to rediscover. This leads us to the uncomfortable truth of why such a profound and connecting knowledge was systematically erased. The suppression came from two powerful, intertwined sources. The first was philosophical and religious. The rise of ideologies that placed humanity on a pedestal, separate from and above a soulless natural world, could not tolerate the idea that a wolf or a whale possessed a language worthy of conversation. To acknowledge animal language would be to acknowledge animal consciousness, and that would force a painful moral reckoning with practices like hunting for sport, factory farming, and the wholesale destruction of habitats. The second source of suppression was, and remains, economic. Industries built on animal exploitation, from industrial agriculture to the fur trade, have a vested interest in maintaining the public perception of animals as insentient products. If a cow could express its fear or a chimpanzee its grief in a way that humans could universally understand, the entire economic model of these industries would face an insurmountable ethical challenge. The lexicon was a direct threat to this profitable ignorance, and so it was cast into the shadows, dismissed as the superstitious ramblings of a primitive culture. Beyond the ethical earthquake, the forbidden papyri suggest an even more profound historical possibility. They speak of a time when humanity did not see itself as separate from the web of life, but as a vocal participant within it. The texts describe rituals and observational practices where human elders would learn the seasonal migration calls from birds, the territorial warnings from bears, and the water source alerts from desert foxes. This was not merely practical survival knowledge. It was a form of active, respectful citizenship within a living, talking world. The lexicon proposes that our ancestors lived in a state of linguistic harmony with other species, where information flowed freely across the species barrier, creating a balanced and deeply informed ecological society. This lost connection, the scrolls argue, is at the root of our current environmental crises. We are managing ecosystems we do not understand and cannot hear, making catastrophic decisions based on a profound deafness to the very communities our actions affect most directly. Re-establishing this connection, as the text implores, is not about nostalgia for a mythical past. It is an urgent necessity for our future. Imagine the possibilities if we could truly converse with other species. We could ask honeybees why their colonies are collapsing, receiving direct feedback on which pesticides are causing them the most harm. Whales, the great historians of the ocean depths, could describe the historical health of marine ecosystems and the true impact of sonar pollution and ship strikes. Elephants, with their generational memory, could guide us to ancient, forgotten water sources in drought-stricken regions and share their profound understanding of social cohesion and grief. The animal tongue lexicon presents a vision where humanity stops being the arrogant manager of a silent world and becomes instead a humble student and partner in a planetary conversation. It reframes our ecological mission not as one of conservation from the outside, but of reconciliation and relearning from the inside, healing a rift in communication that has led us to the brink of disaster. This radical shift in perspective, from seeing nature as a resource to engaging with it as a community of intelligent beings, naturally expands our curiosity to the seemingly silent, stationary world of Flora, and the astonishing possibility that the ancient forests themselves are repositories of a wisdom waiting to be heard. We now journey deep into the heart of the Amazon rainforest, to a forbidden passage that fundamentally redefines the concept of intelligence in the natural world. Known as the Phytognosis records of sentient flora, this collection of shamanic texts presents a vision of the plant kingdom not as a passive backdrop to human drama, but as a vibrant, communicative, and deeply ancient community. The records, preserved by indigenous tribes for countless generations, describe intricate methods for opening a channel of communication with trees, vines, and medicinal plants. This is not a metaphor for quiet contemplation. The texts provide explicit, step-by-step instructions for rituals involving specific psychoactive brews made from forest vines, prolonged periods of sensory immersion in old-growth groves, and dietary preparations that purify the human body to become a more receptive vessel for the subtle, non-verbal language of Flora. The ultimate goal of these practices, as described in the records, is to achieve a state of phytognosis, a direct, intuitive knowing received from the plants themselves, offering insights into healing, ecological balance, and even the deep history of the forest. This ancient concept of plant sentience, long dismissed as primitive animism, is finding a startling and controversial resonance in a modern scientific field known as plant neurobiology. Researchers have discovered that plants possess a complex array of signaling and response systems that bear a fascinating functional resemblance to an animal's nervous system. While plants lack neurons, they use electrical and chemical signaling to communicate across their structures. When a leaf is eaten by an insect, for example, the plant can send electrical impulses to its other leaves, triggering the production of defensive chemicals. Even more remarkably, plants have been shown to communicate with each other. When one tree is attacked by pests, it can release airborne chemical signals that warn neighboring trees of the danger, allowing them to preemptively activate their own defenses. Through vast, subterranean networks of fungal filaments known as mycorrhizal networks, trees in a forest are now understood to share nutrients, water, and information, with older, central mother trees even nurturing younger seedlings in what scientists describe as a wood wide web. The shamans claim that the forest is a single, interconnected, intelligent entity is no longer just a spiritual belief. It is emerging as a scientific model of ecosystem function. The brutal suppression of this knowledge is a direct and tragic consequence of colonial expansion. When European powers invaded the Americas, they did not just see new lands to conquer, they saw unimaginable wealth in the form of timber, rubber, and other forest resources. The indigenous tribes, however, stood as guardians of these forests, and their authority was rooted in their profound, practical understanding of the ecosystem, an understanding they claimed came from the plants themselves. Colonial administrators and missionaries recognized that to exploit the land, they first had to break the people's spiritual and intellectual connection to it. The shamans, who were the living librarians of the Phytognosis records, were systematically targeted, often accused of witchcraft and persecuted. Their sacred texts, written on bark cloth and painted on ceremonial items, were burned as pagan idolatry. This was not merely a religious crusade, it was a strategic campaign of intellectual property theft. By destroying this knowledge, the colonizers eliminated the native experts who could have challenged their destructive logging and mining practices, paving the way for the uncontrolled resource extraction that continues to threaten the Amazon to this day. The most profound and paradigm-shattering claim within the Forbidden Records is that ancient forests act as collective libraries, storing wisdom accumulated over thousands of years. The shamans did not believe they were receiving new information in these communicative states, but rather that they were tapping into a vast historical database encoded within the living network of the forest itself. A 2,000-year-old cedar tree, for example, has witnessed millennia of climatic shifts, species migrations, and ecological cycles. Its growth rings contain a physical record of these events, and the Phytognosis practices suggest this information is not just locked in wood, but is actively held within the plant's consciousness and can be accessed. The texts describe receiving knowledge about long-forgotten medicinal properties of rare herbs, the locations of pure water sources deep underground, and even ancestral memories of geological events like floods or droughts that shaped the landscape. This positions the rainforest not as a collection of individual organisms, but as a single, ancient planetary brain, a repository of biological and historical intelligence that dwarfs all human records. This radical perspective forces us to confront our relationship with the natural world in an entirely new light. If the Phytognosis records hold even a fragment of truth, then the clear-cutting of an old-growth forest is not merely an environmental loss. It is the equivalent of burning down the Library of Alexandria, erasing volumes of irreplaceable wisdom we have not yet even learned to read. The indigenous practice of seeking permission from a plant before harvesting it, once mocked as superstition, can be seen as a sophisticated ethical protocol for interacting with a conscious being. The modern world's treatment of plants as insentient commodities appears not just arrogant, but profoundly ignorant, potentially blinding us to a source of knowledge that could help solve some of our most pressing challenges, from discovering new medicines to understanding and mitigating climate change. The tragedy is that we are silencing these ancient teachers just as we are developing the scientific tools that might finally allow us to verify their whispers, leaving us to wonder what secrets have been lost forever in the chainsaw's roar. The idea that we are not alone in the universe takes on a stunning new dimension with our 21st Forbidden Passage, a collection of Sumerian cylinder seals that go far beyond the controversial translations of Zecharia Sitchin. While Sitchin's work introduced the world to the Anunnaki as gods who created humanity, the Forbidden Chronicles present these entities not as deities, but as teachers from distant star systems. These texts, etched into clay with breathtaking detail, describe the arrival of craft that did not sail on water but moved through the air, and beings who shared not just commands but complex knowledge. The seals reportedly contain schematics for energy systems that harness the power of the sun, principles of mathematics that explain the fabric of space-time, and spiritual philosophies that describe consciousness as a fundamental force in the cosmos. This is not a story of creation by fiat, but one of guided acceleration, where humanity was given the intellectual tools to leapfrog millennia of slow, stumbling development. What makes these ancient accounts feel so electrifyingly relevant today is the remarkable shift happening in the halls of official power. For decades, the topic of unidentified flying objects was relegated to the fringe, dismissed by governments and ridiculed by mainstream media. But in recent years, that wall of silence has begun to crumble. The United States Pentagon has declassified and released videos taken by Navy pilots showing aircraft performing maneuvers that defy our current understanding of physics. Respected intelligence officials have given sworn testimony to Congress about recovered materials of unknown origin and covert programs that have studied these phenomena for decades. At the very same time, the scientific search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, has expanded from listening for radio signals to scanning the atmospheres of distant exoplanets for chemical signatures of life. This convergence of ancient testimony and modern disclosure creates a powerful, converging narrative that we are on the verge of a profound cosmological realization, one that these Sumerian scribes may have documented long ago. The suppression of the extraterrestrial contact chronicles was a coordinated effort stemming from two of the most powerful forces in human society: organized religion and the state. Religious institutions that built their entire authority on the premise of being the sole conduit to a singular, all-powerful God could not tolerate an alternative narrative where divine knowledge came from advanced biological beings traveling in ships. It would have demystified miracles, recast prophets as potential ambassadors, and fundamentally dismantled the theological hierarchy that kept populations obedient to a clerical class. Simultaneously, earthly governments feared the ultimate cultural disruption. The concept of a global human identity, united under a single flag or economic system, is a relatively modern and fragile construct. The confirmed existence of a vastly superior non-human intelligence would instantly render national borders meaningless and shatter the very foundations of political power. All of our conflicts, our economies, and our social structures would be exposed as parochial squabbles in the face of a cosmic community. The ruling classes of every era understood that this knowledge was a threat to the established order, and so the Chronicles were buried, labeled as myth, and their guardians discredited. Perhaps the most compelling and hopeful idea within these forbidden seals is the suggestion of a cyclical relationship between humanity and its celestial mentors. The texts do not describe a one-time visit, but a series of periodic interventions spaced across vast stretches of time. They hint that these advanced cultures operate on a timescale far beyond our own, checking in on the progress of our civilization at critical junctures in our development. According to the Chronicles, these visitors provided the initial spark for agriculture, the foundational principles of geometry and astronomy, and the ethical frameworks that allowed societies to coalesce. The most startling claim is that we are now approaching another such inflection point. The seals speak of a time of great global turmoil and technological awakening, a period where humanity stands on the threshold of either self-destruction or a collective evolutionary leap. It is at this precise moment, the text suggests, that the conditions become ripe for another intervention, not as saviors to solve our problems for us, but as guides to help us navigate our own maturity and take our place within a broader interstellar community. This perspective reframes our current global crises not as an apocalypse, but as a difficult and necessary birth, a planetary rite of passage. Our journey now descends from the stars and plunges into the deep abyss of time, to a forbidden archive that challenges the very timeline of human history. We arrive at the 22nd Forbidden Passage, the pre-flood civilization archive. For centuries, the story of Atlantis has captivated us, filtered through the few tantalizing fragments that survived in Plato's dialogues. But what if we could read his complete, uncensored account? This forbidden text provides exactly that, a comprehensive chronicle that expands the legend of a single sunken island into a portrait of a global antediluvian world. The archive doesn't just mention Atlantis. It includes intricately detailed maps showing a vast network of interconnected societies spanning the globe, from a sophisticated culture in the Sahara when it was a verdant paradise to advanced settlements in Antarctica free of ice. These maps, drawn with an understanding of spherical geography that should not have existed in Plato's time, depict sea routes and land bridges that vanished beneath the waves millennia ago, suggesting the source of his information was far older and far more precise than we ever imagined. The technological achievements described within this archive are what truly separate it from myth and place it in the realm of a lost historical reality. Plato's surviving texts speak of Atlanteans harnessing the power of crystals, but the complete account goes into startling engineering specifics. It describes massive, levitating stone blocks used in construction, powered by resonant energy drawn from the Earth itself, an echo of the technologies we encountered in earlier passages. It details hydrological systems that could purify seawater on an industrial scale and agricultural methods using controlled light frequencies to accelerate plant growth, achieving yields that would be impressive even today. This was not a primitive Bronze Age society. The archive portrays a civilization that had mastered its environment through a blend of physics and a deep understanding of natural energies, a level of achievement that would have seemed utterly fantastical to the classical Greeks and remains breathtakingly advanced to our modern sensibilities. What gives this forbidden narrative a powerful jolt of credibility is its alignment with hard geological data. Modern science has confirmed that the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, was not a gentle transition. It was a period of profound and violent global change known as the Younger Dryas event. Ice core samples and sediment layers from around the world tell a story of rapidly rising sea levels, with oceans swallowing vast coastal plains in a geological instant. We find submerged structures like the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan and the mysterious geometric patterns discovered in the North Sea's Doggerland, all pointing to human activity in areas that are now deep underwater. The timeline of the pre-flood archive matches this cataclysm perfectly. It doesn't just describe a flood, it provides a first-hand account of the climatic chaos and the desperate attempts to preserve knowledge as the waters rose, lending a heartbreaking human dimension to the cold, hard data of geology. Yet, the most revolutionary and dangerous aspect of this archive was not its maps or its technology, but its radical description of how these ancient societies were organized. The text presents a social model that would have been anathema to every king, emperor, and ruling class that followed. It describes a world without centralized rulers, without money-based economies, and without standing armies. Governance, according to the archive, was facilitated by councils of elders and respected innovators, not dictated by a hereditary monarchy. Resources were managed through a sophisticated system of shared stewardship and contribution, a gift economy where status was earned through wisdom and service rather than accumulated wealth. This vision of a society built on cooperation and shared abundance rather than competition and scarcity presented a direct and existential threat to the power structures that emerged after the flood. It proved that humanity had once thrived under a completely different social contract, one that rendered kings and currencies obsolete. This is the core reason the complete pre-flood archive was systematically suppressed and reduced to the cryptic fragments we have today. The philosophers and leaders of the ancient world who had access to this knowledge recognized its destructive potential. How could a pharaoh justify his divine right to rule if a prior, more advanced civilization had flourished without any pharaohs at all? How could an empire built on taxation and tribute maintain its power if people knew that a previous age had managed global trade and complex construction without minting a single coin? The archive was evidence that the hierarchical, top-down model of society was not the natural and inevitable state of humanity, but merely one option, and perhaps not even the most successful one. Its existence was a seed of revolution that could have grown to topple every throne and temple, and so it had to be buried, its most dangerous pages destroyed, leaving only the safer, more mystical shell of the Atlantis story to fire our imaginations while carefully hiding the revolutionary social blueprint at its core. The final, overarching message of the Forbidden Archive is a sobering one, and it resonates with terrifying relevance today. It presents human history not as a linear march of progress from primitive to advanced, but as a series of great cycles. In this view, civilizations rise, reach a peak of technological and spiritual integration, and then, through a combination of environmental upheaval and internal social decay, they collapse. The knowledge is scattered, dark ages descend, and humanity must slowly, painstakingly rediscover its own past. The archive explicitly states that we are currently nearing the end of one such cycle. It suggests that our modern global civilization, with its extreme social inequalities, its ecological recklessness, and its fragile, interconnected systems, is displaying the classic symptoms of a culture approaching its own turning point. This is not necessarily a prophecy of doom, but a warning and an opportunity. It is a call to learn from the ghosts of civilizations past, to recognize the patterns, and to make different choices, to use the knowledge we are rediscovering to break the cycle and navigate this transition toward a renewal, rather than another collapse and a long, forgotten silence. As we grapple with the idea of lost civilizations and their cyclical collapses, our 23rd Forbidden Passage forces us to look upward, confronting a danger that comes not from within our world, but from the cold, dark expanse surrounding it. Imagine unearthing a library of Babylonian clay tablets that do not simply chart the stars for navigation or astrology, but instead serve as a grim cosmic ledger. This is the Celestial Threat Assessment, a collection that moves far beyond identifying constellations to meticulously log the paths of specific comets and asteroids, predicting their close approaches and potential impacts with chilling accuracy. These are not vague omens of a god's displeasure, but precise astronomical records noting the orbital trajectories, rotational periods, and estimated mass of hundreds of near-Earth objects. The most startling revelation within these tablets is not just their predictive power, but their accompanying technical notes. They describe what can only be interpreted as early planetary defense systems, sophisticated proposals for deflecting incoming threats using massive, ground-based arrays of polished lenses to focus sunlight onto an asteroid's surface, or the strategic detonation of chemical explosives at a calculated distance to nudge an object off its collision course. The level of engineering insight rivals concepts currently being debated in modern agencies like NASA, suggesting a forgotten chapter in humanity's long-standing battle to protect its home. The motivation for suppressing such vital knowledge reveals a deep-seated tension between truth and control that has persisted for millennia. For any ruling class, whether a theocratic priesthood or a divine right monarchy, maintaining order depended on the perception that they held a unique influence over fate and the divine will. The movements of celestial bodies were a primary tool in this arsenal. A comet could be interpreted as a sign of a king's legitimacy or a warning against rebellion, all at the discretion of the scholarly elite. The Celestial Threat Assessment completely undermined this authority by demonstrating that cosmic events were not arbitrary signs from the gods but predictable physical phenomena. It stripped the ruling class of their interpretive power. If a common farmer could understand that a bright object in the sky was not an omen but a calculable rock that might be stopped, the entire edifice of control built on celestial mystery would crumble. Furthermore, the knowledge of an inevitable, impending impact even 1 century awake could trigger societal paralysis. Why build cities, farmlands, or pay taxes if the sky was destined to fall? The ruling powers made a cold calculation that a manageable, controllable population living in ignorant bliss was preferable to a panicked, fatalistic, or revolutionary society that knew the true dangers lurking in the void. This leads to the text's most humbling and awe-inspiring claim, that this ancient knowledge was not merely theoretical, but was successfully applied. The tablets do not just list potential threats, they contain records of victories. One lengthy passage describes in detail the coordinated effort to divert a sizable comet fragment headed for a densely populated region of the ancient world. It explains how observatories across Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley tracked the object, while teams were dispatched to high mountain peaks to construct the reflective arrays that ultimately altered its path, sending it harmlessly into the ocean. This narrative forces a dramatic reinterpretation of certain catastrophic events in the geological record. What we have long assumed were random, unavoidable asteroid strikes in prehistory might, in some cases, represent the failures of this early warning system, or perhaps the tragic success stories where a civilization sacrificed itself to deflect a larger, planet-killing object into a less populated area, saving the species but dooming their own culture. The idea that our ancestors were not passive victims of cosmic violence, but active participants in a celestial defense program, completely reframes our understanding of their capabilities and their view of humanity's place in the cosmos. Yet, the final section of the assessment delivers a warning that echoes across the centuries with dire urgency. After detailing the cyclical nature of comet showers and asteroid bombardment, the text concludes that based on the historical pattern of major impacts, another event of significant magnitude is long overdue. The Babylonians, with their obsession for cyclical time, perceived a rhythm to these celestial bombardments, and their calculations suggested that the period of relative cosmic calm we have experienced for the last several thousand years is an anomaly, not the norm. This sobering conclusion connects their ancient fear directly to our modern anxiety. Today, astronomers with powerful telescopes are conducting their own celestial threat assessment, identifying and tracking potentially hazardous objects. They too warn that it is not a matter of if a large asteroid will strike Earth, but when. The forbidden Babylonian text implies that we are living on borrowed time, in a quiet interval between storms, and that the advanced knowledge needed to navigate the next one was lost to us, only to be partially and painstakingly rediscovered in the last few decades. This realization that our planet's safety is perpetually provisional, hanging by a thread in a shooting gallery of cosmic debris, creates a powerful, instinctual desire for shelter, a yearning for a place of refuge that leads our search for forbidden knowledge away from the skies and deep beneath the surface of the Earth itself. Our exploration now takes a dramatic turn, descending from the cosmic dangers of the heavens to the hidden mysteries that lie deep beneath our feet. The 24th forbidden passage, known as the Subterranean World Chronicles, invites us into a realm that feels more like the stuff of epic fantasy than historical record. Preserved in remote Tibetan monasteries, these ancient texts describe something astonishing: a vast, interconnected network of inhabited caverns and luminous tunnels hidden deep within the bedrock of the Himalayas. These are not simple caves, but entire subterranean ecosystems, described as being lit by a strange, phosphorescent flora and powered by geothermal vents and flowing underground rivers. The Chronicles claim these depths are home to a remnant of an advanced civilization, a people who chose to retreat from the endless wars and environmental cataclysms of the surface world millennia ago, taking their most precious knowledge and technology with them to create a self-sustaining refuge in the planet's very heart. What makes these accounts so compelling and separates them from pure mythology is the startling level of practical detail they provide. The forbidden texts are not vague spiritual allegories. They read like a combination of an explorer's guide and a geographical survey. They describe specific, hidden entrance locations, often concealed behind waterfalls in high mountain valleys or camouflaged within the complex geology of certain peaks. The manuscripts detail sophisticated mapping techniques, explaining how the subterranean dwellers navigated using the Earth's own magnetic fields and resonant acoustic vibrations to chart their vast, lightless domains. Most fascinatingly, they outline the social organization of these underground societies, which is described as non-hierarchical and communal, focused on the preservation of knowledge and harmonious living, a stark contrast to the conflict-driven histories of the surface world. This level of concrete information suggests the writers were either drawing from first-hand experience or from a very well-established and detailed tradition. In a fascinating convergence of legend and modern science, recent discoveries have begun to lend a sliver of credibility to these seemingly outlandish claims. Geologists and speleologists have confirmed the existence of absolutely massive cave systems across the globe, some large enough to contain their own weather systems, with clouds and winds forming inside vast, unexplored chambers. The Sun Dune Cave in Vietnam, for instance, is so colossal it has its own jungle and a river flowing through it. Furthermore, unusual and unexplained seismic readings have been detected beneath various mountain ranges, including the Himalayas. These readings sometimes suggest the presence of vast, hollow spaces or complex tunnel networks deep within the crust, anomalies that conventional geology struggles to fully explain. While scientists attribute these to natural geological processes, the correlation with the locations described in the Tibetan Chronicles is enough to make even the most skeptical researcher pause and wonder. The suppression of this knowledge was a collaborative effort between two of history's most powerful forces, the state and the church. For earthly governments, the very idea of an uncontrolled, unmapped, and inaccessible territory within their own borders was a nightmare scenario. A subterranean network could provide a perfect refuge for rebels, dissidents, or rival factions, a place beyond the reach of taxation and army. The potential that such a realm might contain advanced technology or a competing social model only heightened the perceived threat. Simultaneously, religious authorities had their own reasons for suppression. Many established religious doctrines Chinese letter a clear cosmic hierarchy, heaven above, earth in the middle, and the underworld below as a place of punishment or primitive chaos. The concept of a sophisticated, enlightened civilization thriving in the subterranean world directly contradicted this theological map. It blurred the lines between the divine, the human, and the chthonic, and was thus dismissed as heretical mythology, a dangerous idea that could confuse the faithful and challenge doctrinal authority. Perhaps the most profound and hopeful aspect of the Subterranean World Chronicles is their suggestion that this hidden civilization is not lost but waiting. The texts propose that these subterranean beings are the guardians of a vast archive of ancient wisdom, preserving the cumulative knowledge of lost surface civilizations like Atlantis and Lemuria, knowledge that we on the surface have been forced to rediscover piece by piece. They are described as custodians, not permanent residents. The Chronicles end with a remarkable prophecy that these advanced beings will choose to re-emerge and openly share their knowledge with surface humanity, but only when we have collectively reached a critical spiritual milestone. This is not about technological achievement, but about achieving a certain level of global peace, ethical maturity, and ecological harmony. They await the day we cease to be a threat to ourselves and the planet, and instead demonstrate that we are ready to become responsible stewards of the profound truths they have safeguarded for ages. This extraordinary concept transforms the idea of a hollow Earth from a simple adventure story into a powerful metaphorical mirror for our own potential. The hidden civilization beneath the mountains represents a part of our own psyche and our own history that we have yet to integrate: the lost knowledge, the suppressed wisdom, the potential for a more harmonious way of living. Their anticipated return is not about beings from below coming to save us, but about humanity evolving to the point where we can save ourselves, thereby earning the right to be reunited with our own lost heritage. This beautiful notion of a hidden refuge, preserving the best of our past for the possibility of a better future, creates a perfect bridge to our next discovery, which shifts our focus from the depths of the Earth to the very fabric of time itself, and the ancient calendars that may hold the key to understanding our collective destiny. Now we arrive at a forbidden passage that challenges our most fundamental perception of reality: the linear march of time itself. Deep within a sealed cave system on the Yucatan Peninsula, protected from the fires of Spanish friars, a complete set of Mayan codices was discovered, presenting what scholars call the true calendar of human destiny. This is not the simple long-count calendar that sparked 2012 doomsday theories, but something far more profound and intricate. It is a grand, multi-layered system of interacting cycles, a cosmic clockwork where time is not a straight line but a series of overlapping spirals, each with its own rhythm and influence. The text describes cycles within cycles, from the short 20-day unal that governs daily affairs to the massive 26,000-year Great Year that tracks the precession of the equinoxes, and even grander cycles spanning hundreds of thousands of years. The forbidden knowledge within these pages is the understanding of how these cycles converge and interact, creating specific, predictable windows throughout history where the fabric of reality becomes more malleable and societies are presented with critical turning points, moments where humanity can either leap forward into a new age or spiral downward into collapse. What makes this calendar so revolutionary is its startlingly accurate historical record. The Codex doesn't just list abstract dates, it contains what appear to be post-event analyses of these turning points. It describes the convergence of cycles that led to the sudden unification of Egypt under the first pharaohs, another that marked the zenith of the Roman Empire just before its decline, and a particularly potent alignment that coincided with the scientific and artistic explosion of the Renaissance. The text explains that during these convergences, the normal resistance to new ideas diminishes, collective consciousness becomes more receptive, and paradigm-shifting innovations can emerge with breathtaking speed. The Spanish conquistadors and the Catholic Church, upon realizing the predictive power of this calendar, had a powerful motive for its suppression. The Codex allegedly contained projections far into the future, including the accurate prediction of their own empire's eventual decline and the rise of a new global order. For any ruling power, knowledge of its own inevitable collapse is an existential threat, capable of undermining its authority and inspiring rebellion long before its natural end. The calendar was a key to history's pattern, and those in power could not allow the populace to know when the next lock would turn. This ancient concept of cyclical, interactive time finds a fascinating and unexpected parallel in the most advanced theories of modern physics. For centuries, Western science has treated time as a constant, one-way flow, an arrow moving irreversibly from past to future. But in the realm of quantum mechanics, this simple view is breaking down. Physicists exploring concepts like quantum entanglement and retrocausality are beginning to see time not as a river, but as a vast, interconnected landscape where past, present, and future may coexist and influence one another in a complex dance. The Mayan idea of cyclical convergence, where specific temporal patterns create moments of heightened potential, resonates with the quantum idea of a probability wave function collapsing into a specific reality. The calendar suggests that during these convergences, the wave function of human society itself becomes more unstable, allowing for a wider range of possible futures to manifest, depending on the choices we collectively make. It posits that time has a texture with dense nodes of probability and thin, fluid spaces in between, and that the ancient Maya had mapped this topography with a precision we are only now beginning to comprehend with our most powerful equations. The most urgent and compelling message of the true calendar of human destiny is its diagnosis of our present moment. According to the Codex, we are not merely in another routine cycle. We are living through a rare and powerful grand convergence, a moment when multiple major cycles from the 26,000-year precessional cycle to the 5,000-year cycle of the current historical age are all reaching their culmination points simultaneously. This creates an unprecedented window of opportunity, a temporal vortex of immense transformational energy. The text describes this period as a crossroads for humanity, a time of extreme polarity where the forces of chaos and creation are both amplified. It suggests that this convergence enables both rapid spiritual awakening and equally rapid technological evolution, but it offers a crucial caveat. This potential can only be harnessed if it is properly navigated with conscious intention and ethical maturity. Without this conscious navigation, the immense energy of this convergence could just as easily fuel societal disintegration, environmental collapse, and a descent into conflict as it lifts us up. The calendar is not a guarantee of a golden age. It is a warning and an invitation to participate consciously in the shaping of our own destiny. This profound understanding that time itself has a structure we can learn to navigate, and that our consciousness plays an active role in determining which future manifests, creates a direct and powerful link to the nature of our own being. If the great cycles of cosmic time influence the potential of our external world, it stands to reason that the microcosm of the human body must have its own energetic rhythms and structures that interact with these larger patterns. The realization that we are not passive passengers on a linear timeline, but active participants in a cyclical universe, forces us to look inward to the very energy that animates us and how it might be aligned with these greater currents to not only understand our destiny, but to consciously shape it. Having explored the grand cycles of cosmic time, we now turn our gaze inward to the most intimate and intricate map of all, the one that charts the invisible landscape of our own being. Our 26th forbidden passage, known as the Etheric Anatomy Maps, takes us to the ancient Vedic traditions of India, where a collection of manuscripts presents a vision of the human body that is both breathtakingly beautiful and scientifically prescient. These texts do not describe the physical form of muscles and bones that we can see and touch. Instead, they detail a second, luminous body made of pure life force, an energetic blueprint that interpenetrates our physical vessel and governs its health, vitality, and even our state of consciousness. This etheric body is depicted with stunning precision, mapped out as a complex network of luminous channels known as nadis, and powered by swirling vortexes of energy called chakras, each one a gateway between our physical existence and the vast, unseen dimensions of the cosmos. What is truly staggering about these ancient maps is how their descriptions find a powerful and growing resonance with our modern understanding of human physiology. The 7 primary chakras, for instance, are meticulously described as being aligned along the spine, each one correlating almost perfectly with major nerve ganglia and endocrine glands. The root chakra at the base of the spine corresponds to the adrenal glands, which control our fight or flight response. The heart chakra aligns with the thymus gland, a crucial part of our immune system. The brow chakra, or the third eye, sits directly behind the pineal gland, a tiny organ in the brain that regulates our sleep cycles and produces powerful neurochemicals. The Vedic texts explain that blockages or imbalances in these energetic centers will manifest as specific physical and psychological ailments long before any disease appears in the physical tissue. This suggests that the ancient seers were not merely imagining these concepts, they were perceiving a fundamental layer of our biological reality, an energetic infrastructure that modern medicine, with its focus on the purely material, has only just begun to acknowledge. For centuries, the rigid framework of materialist medicine was the primary force behind the suppression of this knowledge. From the 17th century onward, the prevailing scientific model viewed the human body as a sophisticated machine, and anything that could not be dissected, weighed, or measured under a microscope was dismissed as superstition. The idea of an invisible energy body was anathema to this worldview. Doctors and scientists who dared to explore such concepts were ridiculed and ostracized, their careers often ruined. This created a profound schism in our understanding of health, separating the physical body from the mind and spirit, and leading to a medical system that excels at treating acute trauma, but often struggles with chronic, systemic illnesses that may have their origins in these subtler, energetic dimensions. The etheric anatomy maps presented a holistic paradigm that threatened the very foundations of this reductionist approach, and so they were pushed to the fringe, labeled as mystical nonsense unworthy of serious inquiry. Yet, in a remarkable turn of events, the tide is beginning to shift. The development of highly sensitive scientific instruments is now allowing us to measure what the Vedic rishis claimed to see with their inner vision. Devices like Carillion photography can capture the corona discharge or energy field surrounding living organisms, showing dynamic changes that correspond to a person's health and emotional state. Superconducting quantum interference devices, or SQUIDs, are so sensitive they can detect the incredibly faint magnetic fields generated by the human heart and brain. Research into the biofield, a term now used in some scientific circles to describe this complex organizing energy, is gaining traction. Studies are investigating how practices like acupuncture, which works on a meridian system strikingly similar to the Vedic Nadi network, can produce measurable physiological effects, such as pain relief and reduced inflammation, by influencing this subtle energy. We are, in essence, developing the technology to finally read the maps that were drawn thousands of years ago. The forbidden manuscripts go far beyond mere diagnosis, however. They provide a detailed set of techniques for actively perceiving and manipulating this energetic anatomy. The texts describe specific meditation practices for sensitizing one's hands to feel the contours and flow of the energy field, allowing a trained practitioner to detect areas of stagnation or leakage. They outline breathing exercises known as pranayama, designed to draw vital life force into the body and direct it through the nadis to clear blockages and recharge the entire system. There are also precise visualizations for spinning and balancing the chakras, using color and sound frequencies to bring them into harmonious alignment. The ultimate promise of these practices is not just the absence of disease, but the active enhancement of human potential. The texts claim that a clear and vibrant energy body is the foundation for heightened intuition, emotional resilience, and a powerful capacity for manifestation, the ability to consciously shape one's reality by aligning one's internal energy with external intentions. This suggests that our latent psychic and creative abilities are not random gifts, but natural functions of a well-maintained and fully activated energetic system. This holistic vision presented by the etheric anatomy maps fundamentally redefines what it means to be human. We are not just a collection of chemicals and electrical impulses encased in skin. We are dynamic, multidimensional beings of light and information, constantly interacting with the energy fields of other people, the environment, and the cosmos itself. Our physical health, our mental clarity, and our spiritual connection are not separate issues, but interconnected expressions of a single, flowing life force. The recovery of this knowledge represents a critical step in our evolution, bridging the ancient wisdom of inner perception with the modern power of external validation. It offers a path to health that is proactive and empowering, placing the responsibility for well-being back into our own hands, and suggesting that the greatest healing occurs not by attacking disease, but by restoring the fundamental, energetic harmony of the whole person. This profound understanding that we are, at our core, beings of conscious energy, perfectly sets the stage for our penultimate discovery, which explores the ultimate application of this knowledge, the conscious evolution of humanity itself. And so we arrive at the precipice of our own evolution, with a forbidden passage that speaks not of gods or aliens, but of the dormant divinity sleeping within our very selves. The 27th forbidden text, known as the Human Metamorphosis Protocol, was discovered among a cache of Gnostic Gospels deemed too dangerous for the standard biblical canon. These scrolls present a radical idea that the kingdom of heaven is not a location to be reached after death, but a latent state of consciousness to be awakened within the living human organism. The protocol is astonishingly precise, reading less like a prayer book and more like a technical manual for spiritual engineering. It outlines a rigorous, multi-stage process of transformation designed to activate dormant sections of our DNA and unlock capacities of consciousness that most of us only glimpse in our most profound dreams or most intense moments of crisis. This is not portrayed as a gift from an external savior, but as the birthright of a species that has simply forgotten how to remember its own true nature. The methodology of the protocol is a profound synthesis of the inner and outer sciences we have explored thus far. It begins with a series of specific meditations that go far beyond simple relaxation. These are detailed visualization practices for directing conscious awareness into the very nucleus of each cell, with the intention of sending a kind of awakening signal to the 97% of our DNA that modern science often dismisses as junk. The text describes this non-coding DNA not as useless evolutionary leftovers, but as a vast, silent library of potential, a biological archive containing the codes for abilities like intuitive knowing, cellular rejuvenation, and heightened sensory perception. Alongside these mental exercises, the protocol prescribes a strict ethical framework, insisting that the practitioner must cultivate a life of radical compassion, truthfulness, and non-harm. This is presented not as a moral judgment, but as a practical necessity. The text warns that the immense energy released by this metamorphosis would simply overwhelm and destroy a psyche burdened with hatred, deceit, or fear, turning the potential for enlightenment into a catalyst for psychosis. This ancient vision of human transformation finds a fascinating and starkly contrasting parallel in the modern movement known as transhumanism. Both share the core belief that humanity is not a finished product, that we are destined to evolve into something beyond our current limitations. Yet their paths diverge dramatically. Transhumanism looks outward, seeking to use technology, neural implants, genetic editing, and AI integration to upgrade the human hardware from the outside in. It seeks to conquer death by achieving digital immortality and to enhance intelligence by merging with machines. The Gnostic protocol, however, looks resolutely inward. It seeks to work with the natural, evolutionary processes already woven into our biology, using the power of focused consciousness and purified life force to activate our intrinsic software. Where transhumanism aims to build a better human machine, The Metamorphosis Protocol aims to awaken the spiritual being already inhabiting the human form, suggesting that the ultimate technology we seek is not in a lab, but is already encoded in our very being. The suppression of this knowledge was a foregone conclusion for the power structures of the ancient world. For the early church fathers who were consolidating their doctrinal authority, the Human Metamorphosis Protocol was nothing short of heresy. Their power was built on a model of salvation that required a priestly class as the essential intermediary between a fallen humanity and a distant, judgmental God. The Gnostic claim that every individual possessed a divine spark that could be fanned into a flame through their own disciplined practice completely bypassed this entire hierarchy. It made the Church, its sacraments, and its interpretations potentially obsolete. Why would one need confession, indulgences, or the blessing of a bishop if one could directly access the divine source through their own inner work? Simultaneously, political systems recognized the threat of an empowered citizenry, a population of individuals who were psychologically integrated, ethically grounded, and tapping into heightened states of awareness would be impossible to control through fear, propaganda, or the promise of material rewards. They would become self-governing, critically thinking, and resistant to manipulation, the absolute nightmare of any authoritarian regime throughout history. The most compelling and urgent message of the protocol is its timing. The text explicitly states that this voluntary evolutionary leap is not meant for a select few in a remote, mythical past, but is a possibility that becomes available to all of humanity at a specific juncture in our collective development. It suggests we are currently living in that window. The immense pressures of our time, the global connectivity, the environmental crises, the flood of information, and the deep-seated yearning for meaning are not random chaos, but are described as the necessary friction that grinds away our old shells, forcing us to either break or transform. The protocol frames our current global turmoil as the birth pains of a new human, a difficult but deliberate process where the old systems of thought and power must crumble to make space for a more integrated and conscious way of being. This is not an automatic process, it is an invitation. The metamorphosis is available, but only to those who consciously choose to undertake the rigorous inner preparation, to purify their vessel so that it can hold the immense light of this new dawn without shattering. This incredible vision recontextualizes our entire journey through these forbidden passages. The lost technologies, the suppressed histories, the esoteric sciences, they are not merely curiosities. They are the scattered pieces of a user's manual for this very metamorphosis. The knowledge of sacred geometry, etheric anatomy, and lucid dreaming are not ends in themselves, but are tools and maps for navigating this profound inner transformation. The Human Metamorphosis Protocol is the ultimate synthesis, pulling these threads together into a coherent path of self-realization. It suggests that the recovery of this forbidden knowledge now is not an accident of history, but is part of the awakening process itself, as if the species mind is recalling its own instructions just as the time for their application has arrived. This sets the stage for our final, penultimate discovery, which promises to weave every one of these threads into a single, breathtaking tapestry, revealing the ultimate purpose behind the long and deliberate suppression of humanity's greatest truths. And so we arrive at the culmination of our journey, the final and perhaps most transformative of all the forbidden passages, a document known as the Unity Consciousness Manifesto. This is not merely another lost text, it is the grand synthesis, the master key designed to unlock the true meaning behind all the others. Imagine a manuscript that was never written by a single hand in a single time, but one that has appeared again and again throughout history, emerging from the deepest meditative states of mystics across cultures, from the deserts of Egypt to the mountains of Peru. Its message is always the same, a consistent and persistent signal cutting through the noise of the ages. It describes a future not of flying cars or Martian colonies, but of a profound inner shift where humanity begins to function not as 6 billion separate individuals, but as a single, integrated planetary mind, a unified field of awareness where the boundaries of the self become fluid and our fundamental sense of identity expands to encompass the whole. The manifesto makes a startlingly clear argument for how this shift occurs, grounding its mystical vision in a practical, step-by-step process. It posits that collective awakening is not a spontaneous event that happens to a passive population, but is the direct and inevitable result of individual enlightenment reaching a critical mass. The text uses the beautiful and simple metaphor of a bowl of water slowly being brought to a boil. You can add heat to the water for a long time with no visible change, but once a certain number of individual water molecules have absorbed enough energy to transition into vapor, the entire system suddenly and dramatically transforms, bubbling over into a new state of being. In the same way, as more and more individuals undertake the inner work of self-realization, accessing the Akashic records, balancing their etheric anatomy, activating their latent DNA, they are not just healing themselves. They are adding points of light to a global network, increasing the overall frequency of human consciousness until it hits a tipping point, at which stage a new, collective awareness simply clicks into existence, as natural and irreversible as water turning to steam. This ancient prophecy finds a powerful and unexpected echo in the most cutting-edge science of our time. Modern network theory, which studies everything from the internet to fungal colonies, has demonstrated a principle known as emergence. This is the phenomenon where a system of interconnected parts begins to exhibit properties and behaviors that are not present in any of the individual components. A single neuron is not intelligent, but a network of billions creates a conscious mind. A single termite follows simple rules, but a colony builds magnificent, air-conditioned mounds. The Unity Consciousness Manifesto suggests that humanity is on the verge of its own emergent leap. Studies of collective intelligence show that groups can solve problems with a wisdom that surpasses their smartest members, but only under specific conditions, when there is diversity of thought, open communication, and a lack of centralized control. The manifesto's vision of a society based on mutual awareness and cooperation is essentially a prescription for optimizing human collective intelligence, creating the perfect conditions for this new, global mind to awaken and begin addressing challenges that have plagued us for millennia. The sheer, revolutionary power of this vision is precisely why it was, and remains, the most suppressed concept in human history. Every hierarchical control system ever devised, from absolute monarchies to corporate oligarchies to dogmatic religious institutions, is built upon the same foundational model: a small group at the top directing a large, disconnected population at the bottom. The Unity Consciousness Manifesto renders this entire structure obsolete. In a society where individuals are deeply connected through mutual awareness, where information and empathy flow freely, there is no need for a ruling class to dictate terms. Centralized authority becomes redundant, even obstructive. You cannot command and control a neural network, you can only participate in it. The very idea of competing nation-states or corporations vying for dominance becomes as absurd as the left hand trying to defeat the right hand. This knowledge was suppressed not because it was false, but because it was the ultimate threat, a philosophical weapon capable of dismantling every pyramid of power and returning agency directly to the people, to the network itself. The manifesto offers a radical and hopeful interpretation of the tumultuous era we are now living through. It reframes our current global crisis, the political polarization, the ecological emergency, the economic instability, not as signs of an impending apocalypse, but as the necessary and inevitable birth pains of this new consciousness. Just as the pressure and stress of contractions are essential for a new life to enter the world, the immense friction we are experiencing is the pressure of an old, separatist paradigm resisting its own death while a new, integrated one struggles to be born. The text suggests that the widespread access to forbidden knowledge we are witnessing today, from the recovery of ancient spiritual practices to the scientific validation of concepts like the biofield, is not a coincidence. It is the accelerating mechanism. By responsibly engaging with these lost truths, we are not just satisfying our curiosity, we are actively turning up the heat under the proverbial bowl of water, helping more individuals reach the threshold of awareness needed to trigger the global shift. Each person who awakens is not just saving their own soul, they are acting as a midwife for the birth of an entirely new kind of human society, one based on the profound and unshakable understanding that we are, and always have been, one. Stepping back from the incredible journey through these 28 forbidden passages, a clear and undeniable pattern begins to emerge from the shadows of history. It's a pattern that reveals less about the secrets themselves and more about the mechanics of power that have shaped our world for millennia. When you line up the Lemurian Chronicles promising free energy, the alchemical formula for unlimited gold, and the maps to the Earth's own telluric power grid, a single, chilling motive for their suppression becomes clear. These are all technologies of abundance. They offer a world where energy, resources, and even the means to create wealth are decentralized and accessible to all. And that is precisely why they had to be buried. Every power structure, from ancient monarchies to modern global economies, is fundamentally built upon the control of scarcity. An economy thrives on the buying and selling of limited resources like oil, gas, and precious metals. A political system maintains control by managing access to these necessities. Introduce a technology that provides clean, limitless energy for free, and you don't just disrupt an industry, you pull the foundational block out from under the entire economic and political pyramid, rendering the rulers at the top utterly irrelevant. The suppression of abundance isn't an accident, it's a strategic imperative for maintaining the status quo. This same pattern of control extends powerfully into the realm of spirit and mind. Consider the Akashic records, which offer a direct path to universal knowledge without a priestly intermediary, or the Oneironaut's guide that allows any individual to become the master of their own subconscious dream world. Then there are the mass consciousness protocols, which expose the very mechanics of how populations can be influenced through symbols and rituals. Knowledge of this kind is the ultimate threat to institutional authority. For centuries, religious hierarchies have positioned themselves as the essential gatekeepers to the divine, the sole interpreters of sacred texts, and the only conduits for forgiveness and salvation. If every person can access profound spiritual insight or verify historical truth for themselves through a direct connection to a universal consciousness, the entire clerical class loses its purpose and its power. The suppression here is about maintaining a monopoly on enlightenment, ensuring that the path to God, truth, or higher knowledge always runs through a designated, controllable institution that can dictate the terms of the journey. Furthermore, the control of our collective identity and history is perhaps the most insidious form of suppression. The complete pre-flood civilization archive, which described societies without kings or money, and the extraterrestrial contact chronicles, which suggested our origins and knowledge came from beyond the stars, presented narratives that directly competed with the official stories used to legitimize ruling dynasties and state religions. A king's divine right to rule is meaningless if a more advanced civilization thrived for millennia without any rulers at all. A religion's creation story is undermined by texts that speak of genetic engineering by star-faring beings. By erasing these alternative histories and origins, the powers of the past were able to craft a single, approved narrative, a story that always placed them at the center of the universe, as the pinnacle of God's creation or the heirs to a glorious, unbroken lineage. This control over our collective story is the control over our very sense of who we are and what we are capable of, limiting our imagination for what society could be by making the current power structure seem like the natural and inevitable order of things. Yet, despite this relentless campaign of suppression across continents and centuries, the most hopeful pattern we find is one of incredible resilience. The same core ideas of a unified consciousness, an energetic human anatomy, a cyclical view of time, and a lost, advanced technological past crop up again and again in cultures that had no possible way of communicating with one another. The Vedic seers in India mapping the chakra system, the Egyptian priests writing of the sonic manipulation of matter, the Maya calculating grand cosmic cycles, and the Tibetan monks describing subterranean refuges, they were all, in their own ways, pointing toward the same constellation of truths. This global repetition is the most powerful argument against dismissing these passages as mere myth or coincidence. It suggests that these are not invented stories, but perceived realities. They appear to be fragments of a universal understanding, a deep, intuitive wisdom about the nature of reality, consciousness, and human potential that different cultures accessed independently. The consistency of this hidden knowledge across time and space implies we are tapping into something fundamental about the architecture of existence itself. This recurring emergence of forbidden wisdom, despite all efforts to stamp it out, feels less like a series of random discoveries and more like a persistent, almost organic process. It brings to mind the image of a dandelion pushing through a crack in the pavement. No matter how much concrete is poured over the earth, the life force beneath will find a way to reach for the light. Similarly, this essential knowledge of human empowerment and cosmic connection seems determined to surface. It appears in the coded reliefs of a Mayan pyramid, the sealed cave of a Himalayan monk, or the hidden vault of a Renaissance library. It is passed down through oral traditions of indigenous elders and whispered in the mystical schools of Sufis and Kabbalists. This pattern suggests that the suppression itself may be part of a larger evolutionary process. The pressure to hide this knowledge has, in a strange way, forced it to be refined, encoded, and preserved by the most dedicated and discerning minds, ensuring that it would survive and re-emerge precisely when humanity is ready, or perhaps when we are most in need of its guidance. We are now living in the convergence of all these patterns. The internet has shattered the old monopolies on information, allowing the scattered fragments of forbidden knowledge to be shared, compared, and synthesized on a global scale. At the same time, our scientific paradigms are finally catching up, with quantum physics, neuroscience, and genetics beginning to provide a language to explain what the ancients described in spiritual and symbolic terms. The very crises that threaten to overwhelm us, the ecological collapse, the energy shortages, the social divisions, are the direct consequences of the scarcity-based, separatist paradigm that the suppressed knowledge has always opposed. The re-emergence of this wisdom now is not a coincidence. It is the antidote appearing alongside the poison, the long-buried user's manual for a more enlightened way of being, resurfacing at the exact moment we are finally capable of understanding it and face the most urgent imperative to implement it. The great work of our time, therefore, may not be to unearth more hidden texts, but to courageously weave these rediscovered threads into a new tapestry of human civilization, one built not on control and scarcity, but on the foundational truths of unity, abundance, and our own limitless potential. We have traveled a long and winding road through these 28 forbidden passages, and the landscape we have surveyed is both unsettling and profoundly hopeful. It reveals a history not just of kings and conquests, but of a silent, relentless war over the very information that defines human potential. The pattern is undeniable and echoes across every civilization. Knowledge that empowers, that liberates, that offers abundance, is the knowledge that is most fiercely guarded, hidden, or destroyed. Whether it was the promise of free energy from the Earth's own telluric currents, the spiritual liberation offered by direct access to the Akashic records, or the social revolution implicit in a pre-flood society without rulers, each of these truths presented a fundamental threat to the established order. The control of information has always been the ultimate lever of power, and these passages represent the frayed edges of the official story, the threads that, when pulled, threaten to unravel the entire tapestry of controlled history. Yet, the most remarkable part of this entire story is not the suppression itself, but the incredible resilience of the ideas. They refused to die. They survived as coded symbols in alchemical texts, as oral traditions passed down through shamanic lineages, as carefully guarded manuscripts in remote monasteries, and as enigmatic legends that captivated the imaginations of generations. Think of the memory palace techniques preserved in secret Vatican archives, or the principles of sacred geometry, encoded into the very stones of cathedrals and pyramids. This knowledge was simply too vital, too fundamental to the human spirit to be extinguished completely. It went underground, flowing like a subterranean river, waiting for a time when the collective consciousness was ready to receive it once more. This persistence against all odds suggests that we are not merely dealing with forgotten facts, but with essential aspects of reality itself, truths that our species is somehow destined to remember. And that moment of remembering appears to be now. We are living in a period of unprecedented convergence. The internet, for all its flaws, has shattered the old monopolies on information, allowing these scattered fragments to be shared, compared, and woven together by a global community of seekers. At the very same time, our own scientific understanding is undergoing a radical transformation, catching up to the wisdom of the ancients. Quantum physics now speaks of a connected universe that mirrors the concepts of the Akashic field. Neuroscience validates the plasticity of the brain and the power of meditation, concepts central to the human metamorphosis protocol. The very crises we face, the ecological unraveling, the energy shortages, the deep social divisions, are the direct and logical outcomes of the paradigm built on separation and scarcity that this forbidden knowledge has always opposed. Its reemergence is not a quaint historical curiosity. It is the arrival of the necessary tools for our survival and evolution, appearing at the precise moment we need them most. This brings us to the most crucial question of all. What do we do with this recovered knowledge? The answer is not to simply marvel at it, but to engage with it responsibly. The warnings within these texts are as important as the promises. The Sonic Codex cautioned that improper frequencies can disintegrate matter, just as the weather manipulation glyphs implied that tampering with natural systems without wisdom leads to disaster. This is not a call to blindly reconstruct ancient devices or naively embrace every esoteric claim. It is an invitation to a new kind of thinking, a synthesis of the ancient and the modern. It asks us to approach the wisdom of the past with the rigor of the scientific method, and to temper our technological power with the spiritual and ethical maturity that these traditions emphasize. The true application of this knowledge is not in building a new kind of machine, but in building a new kind of human, one that is conscious, connected, and capable of wielding great power with even greater wisdom. So the journey does not end here. In fact, it has only just begun. The very existence of these 28 passages implies there are others still waiting in the shadows, hidden in undiscovered ruins, mislabeled in museum basements, or perhaps even encoded within our own DNA, waiting for the key to activate them. Your role in this unfolding story is more important than you might think. Curiosity is not a passive trait, it is an active force that propels discovery. Every time you question a mainstream narrative, every time you delve into an historical mystery, every time you share an intriguing idea with a friend, you are adding your energy to this collective awakening. You are helping to create the critical mass of awareness that the Unity Consciousness Manifesto described. The search for forbidden knowledge is not a niche hobby for conspiracy theorists. It is a fundamental human drive to understand our true origins, our hidden capabilities, and our ultimate destiny. The greatest discoveries are still out there, and they are waiting for you. We would love to hear which of these 28 passages sparked the most curiosity or resonated most deeply with you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you are eager to continue unraveling history's greatest secrets with us, be sure to subscribe.